evening. I'd like to call the Lawrence City Council Subcommittee on Budget and Finance to order. The subcommittee meeting for January 22nd. Let the record show Councilor Aquino present and Councilor Vasquez present. Let's start with Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Councilors, we just have a few things on the agenda to go through. If we could do, start at the top, document 34912. This is authorization to exempt grant funds. Mr. Anello, Finance Director, put that on the agenda. I don't know if this was together as 413 and 513, or is this separate from 413 and 513?
This is separate. The 413 and 513, I didn't put those before the council. That came, excuse me, came directly from Community Development Department.
I got you.
This one here, the one that's before us, 34912, is from the Fire Department for a emergency performance grant. It's $27,500, and I think in your packet there should be, the fire chief had supplied me with the entire grant application and all the attachments there too. But in general, it's for purchasing some software for emergency management purposes and a portable radio. Software was $22,000 and a portable radio is $5,500.
Councilors, I think one of the things that's really helpful, just as a housekeeping item, nothing to do with the item in front of us. Can we just a motion to the clerk's office when he sends down agenda items that have to do with money, that the specific dollar amount associated with that item be in with the actual agenda item, because we have 3 here. All of them have money associated to them, and none of them have them on the actual agenda item. That's important because some people don't look at the fine detail. So, councilors who are busy could look quick and say, oh, that authorization is going to be for $25,000. I should probably look closer at that. So I know we've talked about it in the past, but I'd like to send them a letter.
Sure, I make that informal motion.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. The ayes have it. Thank you. So just to read into the record, the authorization is whereas the fire department has been awarded an emergency performance EMPG grant of $27,500 from the Massachusetts Department of Emergency Management, and whereas the purpose of this grant is to replace current incident reporting, inventory tracking, and employee scheduling software, also purchase devices for emergency management data tracking and accountability, and whereas the department intends to use the grant funds to purchase new software and 7 iPads, and whereas the department has accepted the grant and requests authorization from the City Council and the Mayor to expend the grant funds listed below for the purposes of such grant. And now therefore be it ordered, acting pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 53A, that the City Council approves the expenditure by the Fire Department of the grants listed below for the purpose of such grants, subject to the approval of the Mayor, and the grant funds received shall be deposited with the City Treasurer and held as a separate account and may be expended for the purposes of the grant without further appropriation. Emergency grant of $27,500. I don't know if other councilors have any questions. I know the chief's not here, but is this, I know that the CompStat that the police department uses is very detailed data. Is this going to help us get more detailed data on the fire side?
I'm not familiar with the software that they purchase, other than that it's related to the emergency management that the fire department performs, and there's a grant that from the state, Commonwealth of Mass grant, which is funding it. That's about all I know. I don't know the specifics of the software itself. But if I, there is just the brief sentence I can give you, which is attached to the grant, is the Lawrence Fire Department is constantly looking for ways to improve their emergency response equipment. With hard economic times and reduction in budget, this grant will be used to replace obsolete equipment. The department is looking to upgrade its software for equipment inventory, tracking, personnel assignment, incident tracking, and hazardous material location. Cost of the software is $22,000. So I think that explains it at least a little bit.
I don't know, Council, do you feel like, I mean, the chief's not here, I actually saw him at a neighborhood meeting, and thought he might be, but,
I
you
think
just
he
wanna send him a
plans,
note?
he did send me an email. He plans on being, in case there's any questions for the full city council, he just couldn't be here tonight.
Can we just send him a note for him to send us a memo of what the software pertains, like all the things that they look to track? And is it similar to the CompStat data? I don't wanna do this as a formal motion, I just wanna send him a note. All right. Any other questions, councilors?
I'd actually like to send it up to the full council with a favorable recommendation, and I know that the chief said that he's gonna be present for any questions, so I think that,
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
The ayes have it. We're all set.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda, councilors, is document 4-13 and document 5-13. If we can take those together as a group and table them, because both were for the Community Development Department, Mr. McCabe, and he's not with us this evening. He asked us to table it to the next meeting.
Motion to table?
Motion made to table document 4-13 and 5-13. Is there a second?
second.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. The ayes have it. Document 6-13, this is pensions of surviving spouses of disabled employees, acceptance of general law, chapter 32, section 101. This was put on the agenda by Council President Moran, but I think we have somebody in the audience to help us out. Just name and address for the record.
Sure, it's Gina Rizzo. I'm with the Lawrence Retirement Board, and I'm at 15 Rachel Road, Methuen, Mass.
How you doing today?
I'm good. It's nice to meet you guys.
Seeing you.
If I may, I want to apologize first off. The original documentation that was sent down had Chapter 139, the Acts of 2012 in it. It's actually a different section. It's Chapter 131, the Acts of 2010. One that was sent down is actually asking to increase to 12,000. We're only asking for a different section that's to 9,000. So I do have that if I
Okay.
may
Do you have
pass
an
it out.
amended document for us?
I do.
You got a copy? Gotta make sure it gets to the clerk's office, too. So this is changing the chapter and so it's Mass General Law 32,
Yep.
section
this-
1, but not section 101.
Right, it's actually Chapter 131 of the Acts of 2010. It's dealing with the exact same group of individuals under the same law. It's just, it was originally enacted in 2010 and allowed boards and commissions across the state to raise it to $9,000 from $6,000. And that's what we're here, or I'm here to ask for your consideration for this. It's a small group of people.
So it's a 6 now?
No, yes, it's at 6,000 now. What this law does is it allows to raise to 9,000.
I think for the benefit of folks at home, could we talk about what the 6 is for?
Sure, it's their salary. It's $500 per month. This is a special group of people. They are the survivors of accidental disability retirees that retired prior to 1996. At the time, if you retired under a disability, you were only allowed 2 options, and if you wanted to provide for a spouse, this was one of them. And it was changed in 1996 to allow them a broader scope of options so that they could provide more for their spouses. So, and right now we have 18 of them. I think in that list, that hasn't changed.
That's the list on the second page?
Right, on the second page, it just shows how many we have.
So what year was it that the benefit was started? Or when was it available for them to take it?
Yep, prior to 1996, they were only allowed to choose an A and a B if they retired under a disability. An A would provide nothing to a
Okay, hold on.
spouse. Oh, I'm
So
sorry.
if it's okay, so in 96,
Yep.
if you retired with if we retired with a disability, you could provide for your
A s-
spouse?
yeah.
Or,
Or not provide for a spouse. At that point in time, the law allowed you to choose a B if you wanted to provide for a spouse. And what it did was, depending on what you retired from, if you retired from, say, the heart law, if you died from that, an injury related to that, say if you had a heart attack, your survivor would end up getting 72% of your salary. But say if you died from cancer, you would fall under the Section 101. So your survivor would only get a maximum of $6,000, which, I mean, it's only $500 a month.
year?
Yeah. So, I mean, we have 907 retirees. I did a little chart on the end. I mean, they're one of our lowest groups of, survivors. We have 47 boards across the state have accepted this.
and where does the money come from?
Right now, I mean, we pay, our annual pension amounts out of it. We appropriate a certain amount to the city each year, and it's actuarial assumed. I asked our actuary, it would cost approximately $20,000, and that wouldn't take effect for a couple of years.
It comes out of the retirement board funding, it doesn't come out of general
Right now,
fund.
yes, our pension, that $26,000 figure, comes out of that, but we appropriate a bill to the city every year annually, and they pay us a portion, an appropriated portion, an actuarial assumed portion.
So, Mr. Anello, can you explain this to us, what part of it comes from the general fund and what doesn't?
The reason why it's general, I left my glasses. The reason why it's a general fund is all of the, predominantly all of the retirement assessment from the retirement board is paid out of the general fund. So this additional amount would be funded through the general fund, the additional approximately $20,000 annually that the actuary thinks this would cost the city.
So it goes, retiree, people paying into the retirement system. We pay, the retirees' spouses out of general fund, and then they then they give us the money, or how is it that?
Well, the way it works is that,
Just trying to figure out whether or not tax dollars are being used, or if this is coming from retiree dollars.
no, it's tax dollars in the sense that the entire appropriation predominantly, and we pay about $15 million roughly a year to the Lawrence Contributory Retirement System. And all of the members in that system, including their withholdings, the employee contributions,
Yep.
and then the employer contributions, the employer has to kick in about $16 million. So predominantly, all of this would be an employer contribution because they're surviving spouses, so they've already received their full employee benefit. So this will all be kicked up to our, as the employing units, and it's the City of Lawrence, it's the Lawrence Contributory Retirement, Lawrence Housing Authority, the Merrimack Valley Regional Transit Authority, and I think I'm missing one,
Vocational school?
vocational school. So there's 4 employing units, will all get a piece of this $20,000. Predominantly, most of it will be applicable to the City of Lawrence, since we're about 90% of the total appropriation.
In the school department, yeah. It's about half, actually.
So that's, in general, it's, for the surviving spouses, it's a small increase, but it does impact us to a certain degree in the tax dollar, and that's what I think Gina is indicating, that the actuary did a quick calculation, and approximately our 15 million will go up by about 20 million annually because of this small change.
It's gonna go up 20?
20,000.
It's gonna go up 20,000?
20,000, right.
So it'll be 35,000 from what it is now? You said it was 15,000?
No, it'd be 20.
It's 20,000 increase.
The increase of 3,000 per retiree over,
Amortized over.
who knows what those
Right.
actuaries do, we don't really
Right.
know. It's a lot of math, but he calculates that annualized cost through 2040 is what our funding schedule is. Will be approximately $20,000 annually for us to give, 18 retirees an additional 3,000 per year.
What's our annual cost now?
Approximately 15 to 16 million.
Also, okay.
Yeah, that's the total amount that the city has to come up with.
Yeah,
and not go up
I asked
20.
I asked the wrong question.
Yeah.
What's the total for the surviving spouses annually?
Right now, annually, I don't think I have that total.
It's 6 times 18, right?
Right,
Or no?
yeah,
54,000.
there you go.
She's gonna go to 74,000.
I mean, if you look at the actual list of the 18 people, some of them are already over that $9,000 salary, and what happens is they've been retired for so long that their cost of livings have increased them over that. So if you look at the
Okay, see it.
yeah, so I mean, it's not even 18 people that it's gonna completely impact. I did a little chart, I mean, yes, we have a huge appropriation and there's a lot of retirees, but, I mean, more than half of our retirees are under $20,000 for an annual pension. That's, it's really low. 27% of them make under $10,000 a year in a pension.
Any chance, this, page 2 in your packet, any chance you can see where people, the surviving spouses, the deceased spouses, what unit they came from, if they were,
I didn't
Lawrence.
put that, I can definitely get something.
is that okay to get? I don't wanna pry into people's lives, I just wanna see.
I mean,
Actually, thinking about it now,
looking at them, most of them are city police and fire. Just knowing the people, I've been with the system 24 years, so. I would go city police and fire. But like Mark said, it impacts, the housing authority will pay a portion of it, it impacts all of our governmental units.
actually, in second thought, because their names are in there, I think maybe just for, decency's sake, can we give these back to you and just put
Yeah, absolutely.
where the unit that they came from, like if they were
Sure.
Lawrence Police,
Yeah,
some
that's
other
fine.
indicator?
Absolutely.
Because it's gonna go in the public record, people are gonna
Okay.
put this online and stuff, so it's
Sure, no,
I'm
that's
sure.
fine.
to protect their information.
Yeah, there's nothing on there that's non-payroll, that couldn't be released, but absolutely.
So we'll give this back to you. Any other questions on this, councilors? What you guys thinking about this? So the item is gonna change from document 6-13, pensions of surviving spouses of disabled employees, acceptance of general law 32-101. It's gonna be 32, chapter 131 of 2010.
Right, 101 wasn't the correct really way to put it anyway. I think the one that was submitted was chapter 139. It just impacts section 101 widows.
You gotta tell us the right one, or we'll do it wrong by mistake, so.
Right, right,
So, general law, chapter 32, section 131
131
of 2010.
of 2010, correct.
Not to confuse it anymore.
No, it's not, we wanna
But
unconfuse.
I just noticed there's two things at play here. We are accepting chapter 32, section 101. But
Right.
what Gina is indicating that it's the acts of 2010, section 201, or 2010, section 131 of the acts of 2010.
Which
Those
allows
acts of
increase.
2010 turned into a mass general law called chapter 32, section 101. So I think it's correct if you take the vote to adopt chapter 32, section 101.
An increase under
Is
the
that correct, Bill? Yeah, Bill's the,
under the provisions of 131?
We in agreement?
Sounds good.
I figured it out just to make sure, so.
All right, so we're back to the original 32-101.
Okay.
Good with us. Yeah, I think that's it. Okay. Should we entertain a motion to send this up to the full council with a favorable recommendation?
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
The ayes have it.
I thank you very much.
All set, so
And our
next time.
retirees, thank you.
Okay, you want these back? Can you create this one, just looks like this, just take out the names? You can take Sue's too. Yeah, take hers too.
Thank you.
So you get it to the, our secretary, so she has it? And CC the clerk, just so that the city clerk has a copy?
I'll have a new one coming.
And you'll get it to Clerk Maloney? You get it to Clerk Maloney, Maloney as well? All right, great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilors, next item on the agenda, we were all done for the stuff that's on the agenda, but I'd like to see if we could take off the table document 33512.
So move.
Motion been made.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
The ayes have it. Councilor, this is an item that I put on the agenda after the last election because of much conversation about the effectiveness of our election day and what we spent our resources on and how they came up with those resources, how to spend those resources, the processes in which the data is taken care of. And because the election process is, fundamental to our democracy and the appearance of impropriety casts a shadow on all elections, especially if you are either a victor or not as fortunate in those contests. You just want to make sure that what we do and how we do it is beyond reproach. I think that, small vetting of of that day will tell us a little bit about what's going on there. And I submitted to the city clerk, and I think I CC'd everybody on this, in the committee, a list of questions that I had, so that he and his staff could go about preparing for it. We do have some questions from the community that came in through different venues that I would have some for them to answer. Allow some people in the audience to ask some questions. Councilor Bernal should be on her way. She has some questions from her constituents, but it was a long list of questions, so the clerk is with us this evening. If we can start off with the list of questions that we provided. Mr. Clerk. How you doing today?
Good evening, councilors.
Good evening. How you doing?
Always good.
So if we can start with the first question that I had sent out to you. What types and numbers of pre-election organizing meetings did you have leading up to the election, and who was in attendance?
First of all, good evening, councilors. Thank you for the opportunity to address these issues. These pressing issues certainly gives us an opportunity to review and to dispel any misconceptions, misunderstandings, and otherwise disinformation that we often encounter in every election, so that people know exactly what the Office of the City Clerk Election Division in particular is doing in terms of preparation for each election. Answering the first question asked, typically before every election, about 4 to 6 weeks, I make not a habit, just first thing in the morning, to go downstairs in the election division and we work, discuss, and brainstorm any of the issues that are pressing in any given election for about 8 weeks, that until they're exhaustively covered. If there's no issues, certainly the time that's spent on that, and the people in attendance are simply the election division staff, all three of them, Mr. Tavares, Mr. Tejeda, and Mr. Reyes, and myself. And we kind of divvy up the work as to what needs to be done, who should be responsible for doing the task. For instance, we do that with the census as well. When we're going to order, when's the timing for trainings, when's the timing for voting lists, all the nuances, all the details that essentially are run through the election division. Is it technically a planned meeting? I plan it daily. I mean, I don't plan it the day before as to what issues. I know what issues are to be addressed off the top of my head, as the staff does. And we always end up saying, anything else? Is there anything else we're missing? Also, to consider any issues that are presented by the Office of Secretary of State, and certainly any other issues that just happen to arise. They're addressed. Again, whether it takes an hour, 2 hours, usually not more than an hour, and then off we go. So it's really not much more than that. We don't have a round table, we don't meet in chambers and things that's more informal, and trying to make sure we get formally done what needs to be done.
So you don't meet with the police department and the Department of Public Works?
My meetings with the police department and Department of Public Works are essentially conducted independently. I will call them up, I'll meet with Mr. Ascenzi, tell him what I need, I'll go up to his office, sit down with him well in advance of the election, usually about a month in advance of the election with the police department. I'll contact whoever the liaison, it's been Lieutenant Conway for the past about year and a half now, and always provided assurance, details as to what will be provided. Still haven't quite in my mind as to how that structure of overtime works with the police department. I can never quite figure that out, because they don't know who's going to actually show up or be assigned in terms of rank.
So you meet independently with the police department and the Department of Public Works?
Yes, I do.
Did you meet with the Department of Public Works before this last election?
Oh, yes. Absolutely. There is an election, I don't meet with them. I mean, it's not a tacit,
You never meet with everybody together?
well, it's not much that this staff has to do with, we'll say, outfitting a poll location. It really, I mean, I can tell them how many numbers are expected, but the number of locations don't change. The number of, or the amount of equipment doesn't change. It pretty much is the same and hasn't changed, God, for at least 8 years or more in that regard. And I'm hoping to press upon this panel to do some changes in that regard, as you probably read in the report.
I just figured that on a presidential election, that you would have had a more coordinated meeting effort.
For what?
For the election.
For what, though? To do what? There are a set number of equipment that we have. They placed at the poll location. Average is about 8 to 10, depending upon the size of poll location. Doesn't change. I can't distribute equipment I don't have.
Well, I guess I think, and councilors can jump into this at any time, just I know before I, what do you call it? I'm trying to think of one thing, at work, before we launch an email, we have 5 meetings with people involved in the creative, and people involved with the list, people involved with finance, just to make sure we're all kind of on the same page, or everybody in the same room. And that seems like, because it's such a huge effort, that you would want to have that type of
When it's done 8 years in a row, it doesn't change all that much, Counselor. That's all I can impress upon you. The only things that do change are certainly the number of voters, the number of voters that may show up, the prediction that it will or will not occur. Physical equipment is a whole different thing than a voting list. But the occurrence of all the events in combination occur on each election.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying to you, and again, I'm trying to figure out a way to make this thing better, that if you have a Plan A, a certain amount of people come out of Plan B, but certain people come out of Plan B. I mean, clearly, you did it the decentralized way, and you had more people than you expected, and you had to call in 16 people to cover. So clearly, something happened,
It's about
right?
20, yeah, about 20.
Something happened that you didn't expect. And that's gonna happen every time. I know that that's the case. I'm just, again, I guess what I'm saying, as to your answer to this one, that
Yeah.
in an effort so large, that that it's surprising that you wouldn't have had everybody together and say, okay, even if somebody may have had a beef from the last time, maybe you had the police say, yeah, one of the sergeants said there was this thing going wrong in this poll location, or, even DPW said, hey, we actually do have something that we can maybe help you out with the booths. So I'm saying, like, that whole idea of not coming together is just a little
Well,
surprising.
I seek not to waste my staff's time for the amount of work they have to do in a relatively short period of time with coordinating with something that has nothing to do with their work. In other words, DPW has nothing to do with the list and the number of people that show up. DPW is getting their manpower together to make sure that the gates are delivered to the schools where they have to put up gates for recess, to make sure that the booths are delivered and set up at each of the schools. I also coordinate with the school departments to make sure that the school department is notified through the building managers that they have a coordinated effort that they will put up the voting booths. And it can't say it doesn't occur every once in a while. Geez, someone didn't put up the voting booths over at Essex Towers. And then we immediately dispatch people to go out. We do have emergency measures in place to do stuff like that.
Well, you may want to think about it, because there's a reason why we have an emergency response committee where the police and the fire sit together, and oftentimes they have two different functions. So I would suggest to you that, again, because you're the election official of the city, it is not, I don't think it's a wise use of, a wise expectation that you, by yourself, connect all these dots when you're paying everybody else to do the same thing. If you coordinate better, with my past experience in leadership positions, you coordinate better, you have less problems.
Well, I
So-
respectfully disagree, because I've been doing this for 8 years, and it doesn't really change all that much. And coordinating the effort is really not the key as much as the function of having viable equipment and enough,
Have you tried that before, like get people together to talk about
and
it?
enough staff to man the polls is really the key to this trick. And having the polls open.
Have you tried that before, getting people together to talk about it beforehand?
No, I can't say I have.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions about this planning part? All right, just the next one is, what do you base your election day budget on?
Second.
I think there's one.
Election day budgets, again, are prepared, as you know. What do we do? March, April, May, June, of any budget season, based upon prior expenses. Most of the costs of every election, if not all of them, are fixed costs. Costs of printing, costs of voting booths, costs of paper, costs associated with police, staffing, poll staffing, again, are 98% fixed. They rise as the economy falls, as the costs and expenses are charged by the vendors that do the work. The work that is done, or we'll say farmed out, our primary vendor is through contract LHS Associates, who does a bulk of the work, printing ballots, printing voting lists, sending out census, things of that nature. The individual election costs, and I did provide you with a list, I maintain a continual running analysis of costs and expenses for each election. And I've given you the summary of that list.
That's this?
Right. Appears at the end of the report, I guess, under election costs and analysis. And that runs, I've been running that on Excel since September of 11 through this past election to try to keep an idea where my costs and expenses are going and where they run. Because of redistricting, we've seen a significant drop in printing costs, notices to voters, and particularly District C and D. Remember getting those postcards? Those postcards don't come out anymore. In fact, people were so used to getting them, I started getting calls, how come I didn't get my postcard? But it is about a $5,000 to $7,000 savings per election to
Is
unify
that-
that.
And what line does that, because this is
Well, I didn't,
pretty rolled up.
yeah, I didn't do a line-by-line item. That's about a 20-page report. I didn't know if you wanted that, but I can get that to you.
So there's either the 20-page or the 1-page?
Well, this is a summary.
Okay,
This is a summary.
I'll take the
It
20-page.
gives me, yeah, I can get you of what this is based on.
We'll take the 20 page.
Yeah, I can get it to you. I don't have it right now. I can get it to you by email if you'd like.
That's okay. Yeah,
Sure.
email would be great. So, under goods purchase is where those cards would have gone underneath?
Yeah, it'd fall under goods purchased, essentially.
Or all goods?
Like, for instance, in this election, we didn't have to purchase ballots. We didn't have to print them. State picks it up. You know, so that's a savings there, but in the municipal election, that's a $7,000 to $10,000 additional.
So you said 2011, general, you spent 67,000. That was a municipal election year.
Right.
And you budgeted, this looks like $7,000 more for the, $7,000 more for each other election, for the state, the presidentials, primary and general. Right, that looks like that. In September of 2011, the primary, you spent 63.3.
Well, I notice I see an increase going for each year as we get to the presidential primary. That goes from 67 to 70, and then about 70 goes down actually for the state primary, the bottom line.
Yeah, but see, you know, if you do, because, yeah, I don't see them as separate, right? If you draw a line on the municipal year, that's the primary and the general. That's one set of numbers for the primary and general, and then to the right of that is the presidential primary, you added 70, and then you have the state primary and the state general.
Well, I don't add them going across to the right. Those are added up and down.
Both things are, oh, no, I know you don't have them added right to left. But
Yeah, I don't.
But I'm comparing the primary and the general of 2011 with the primary and general of 2012.
Right. In the
And that's
primary and the
only-
general, they stay between 63 and 67 for the municipal and 70, and about the same for the state and presidential primary, where the state election went up about
So,
4.
so $7,000, let's leave the presidential primary out because there's no comparison. Let's just say that, and the idea is that you probably have less turnout in the presidential primary anyway.
Turnout is not a function of cost. Costs are pretty much static, no matter what election you run, pretty much. I mean, off the
I
top
don't
of
know,
my,
maybe it's me, I'm not getting to understand it. So,
if I have 1 million people turn out, I mean, the only thing it's gonna cost me is paper, probably less than 2 cents a page. That's not gonna change my obligations to have poll workers, police officers, you know, voting lists at each of the polls. That stays pretty much static.
so regardless of what they work that day, the pay for everybody working is static?
That's correct.
They could be there 24
Well, the
hours?
assignment, the required assignment, number one, is static. The pay is set by council.
The question's really clear, really easy, right? If I'm a worker, and I go in at 8 o'clock, and all day only 400 people vote, I'm done at 8 o'clock. I go home, I get paid a certain rate. Another election comes, I'm still that same worker, I go in at 8 o'clock to work, I go home at 3 in the morning, because everybody in the planet voted, do I get paid a different rate?
No,
How about the police officers?
I can't answer that question. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if they're in for the duration once they're assigned there, or they get a differential because they stay later. I don't know that answer.
But you pay for it regardless, right? If there's a differential.
Well, the city does pay for it. It actually comes out of, they've been trying to shift it back and forth between the clerk's budget and the police budget.
Today's in your budget,
Today it is. Last year it wasn't.
right? So today's in your budget,
Today it is.
okay. So you're not sure whether or not they get paid for you must have known, because they just happened. They stayed longer this last election. I was at the.
And
voting booth
looking
till-
at the cost, it doesn't look,
11.
it doesn't look like it was all that much more. Be honest with you, it was, I see 5,000 more, actually, it is a lot more.
Yeah,
But that might be your answer. I don't know. I can't speak with any sureness of it. I can ask Lieutenant Conway if there is a differential that pays them more if they stay later.
Let me tell you, I think that, we can move on to the next thing. The idea that there's no correlation between the number of people that come out to vote and how much it costs us,
Not on the poll workers.
Shocking.
Not on the poll workers.
on the total budget.
Every city and town does it the same way. Poll workers are paid a flat rate. They're in for a pound, they're in for a penny, it doesn't matter. And I tell them at training, it's
I know you're
$190
focusing,
for a day.
yeah, I'm
You
sorry
stay
about that.
till
I'm sorry,
the
I
end
know
of
you're
night.
focusing on the poll workers, but I'm talking about the
That I
whole,
know.
the whole budget.
Well, you're talking about police officers. I can't tell you if there's a differential or how much there is for that differential. It appears there is.
And supplies, nothing. It all is gonna be the same.
Supplies don't change all that much. For instance, we get a supply of ballots for probably 125% of the turnout of registered voters. So we have them.
So there's no correlation between the amount of turnout and how much it costs us to run an election.
Not that I know of, no.
Okay.
Through you, Mr. Chairman.
Council Vasquez.
Just for clarification, so we get ballots for 125% of the turnout.
That's how the state does about 125% over.
Okay, so that means
I
just in
try to
case
get it
there's
down
some.
to 100% on a municipal.
Okay. Right,
I'm not gonna usually get more than 100%.
They give you 100%, 125% ballots,
Right,
so you don't run out of ballots.
exactly.
Okay.
They don't like that. I don't either.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Anybody else have a question on the budget?
Would it make sense, through you, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Would it make any difference if we were to use, instead of 22 polling locations, to just use half of that, or 12 polling locations?
Council, I'd like to use one, because then I don't have to run around the city. I'm a big advocate for one polling location. Put it all in one building, please. I save on gas.
Yeah.
$65.
Yeah.
Consolidation is always better. Again, recommendations for consolidation, what you'll see happen, and we're probably gonna do that again with one polling location to try to make it a little bit less expensive, is the citizens of Lawrence are used to a neighborhood polling location. You guys know it better than I do. They want to go down the street and vote in their neighborhood. The minute you start proposing consolidation, there'll be opposition, certainly, well worth hearing. Put that before the council, it has to go before council, council has to approve.
Okay. One of the other questions that I asked had to do with staffing. How many people were scheduled to work on the election day? How many first-time wardens and clerks did you have that day? And provide a list with, of all the election day workers. You did provide the list of all the election day workers, but can someone explain to me what happened as far as staffing is concerned? I know there's a response there, but I don't know if you want Mr. Tejeda
As
to.
far as
I just
the
want
poll
to
workers themselves?
explain all of it to me. I don't really.
The list that I've provided to you shows the number of pre-election assignments that were assigned and approved by the mayor's office for assignment at polling locations as anticipated. The statute calls for essentially is 8 poll workers per location. We generally hit between 6 and 7. Some of them we hit 8, and some of them we hit 9 in terms of the pre-election assignments. And we assigned at that point 188. The statutory amount we're supposed to hit is 192, so we're about 4 workers off. I provided also a post-election assignment because what happens in any election, poll workers call up, we're sick, I can't come in, I can't work this election, I can only work a half a day, can I work at another location because I can't make it over there, can you get me a ride, that type of stuff. With this election, which was, we've not seen ever, we pulled in another 20, actually 19. Was it 19 or 20?
20.
Poll workers, additional. 20.
Where did you get these 20 folks?
We have a backup list of poll workers. Some people say, geez, I can't work, but if you need me, call me. And we have a list, I think, of about 30 or 40. Sure, absolutely. I think Mr. Tejeda would like to explain that to you in more detail.
Yeah, and specifically what happened that day, because just if you could start from the beginning.
Good evening.
How you doing, Mr. Tejeda?
Good. In September, we scheduled 175 pool workers. From the 175, we had 169 that work. And we expected a November election busier than September election. And we asked the wardens, how many extra workers do you need for November? Because I know we got to get a bigger turnout. And I got the recommendation for all wardens. Some wardens say, I don't need nobody. I say, that's fine. Are you sure? Based on that, we had 188. We scheduled 188 poll workers for November. 19 more, 20 more than what we have in September.
So you asked the wardens what they needed. And
What they
then-
needed. Based on that numbers, I increased the numbers of people available for November from 175 to 188.
Any chance you thought maybe, that warden doesn't really know what he's talking about, let me give him another body?
Yeah. In some cases, like Parkton School, I asked 3 times, the warden, are you sure you don't need anyone? Because I was 100% sure they got to be sure.
Yeah.
But on the day before, the weekend before the election, I checked the numbers, and I was expecting a big number of inactive voters to vote. That's why I called all the wardens, and I recommend the wardens to set a special person just for the inactive voters. What I did, I got the weekend before 20 college students. 16 of them new workers. And those college students was 100% bilingual, Spanish and English. On Monday, the day before the election, I called the mayor, and I sent a letter to the mayor, because I need his approval. I say, I'm expecting a big turnout tomorrow. I need an extra people everywhere in the city. I send you the list of the people expecting to add to the list. I want your approval. He said, okay. And those people were available on November 6th.
Their names are on the post list, right?
Early in the morning, I have 3 at midday because they have class on Northern Essex, and they started at 1 o'clock. The rest of the people started at 7 o'clock. And like places that say, no, I don't need an extra worker, call me in the morning. I need it. I say right away. But even with the provision, you see what happened.
Yeah.
We got more than 5,000 inactive voters voting. That the whole thing is all about that. We never got that many inactive voters voting, and the whole process is slowed down because the inactive voters, paperwork.
Can I ask you a question?
Councilor Bernal?
I just want to make sure I understood correctly what you said. You said we had 5,000 inactive voters vote in the
Yeah.
presidential election. Can I just ask you, because this is the question that people keep asking me. They say, I went to vote and I was on an inactive list. How does someone become inactive? That seems to be the real question. People feel like, I filled out the census, I voted in September, why am I inactive? So how does someone become
Guarantee,
inactive?
if they answer the census or they vote in the previous election, I'm 100% sure they gotta be active.
So if they voted in the September election or they filled out their census, they should be active.
See, the real question isn't how do they become inactive? In the last election, or in this cycle in 2012,
Yeah.
if you remember, the census went out in late February. Presidential primary was on the 6th of March. So even if they voted on the 6th of March and got the census afterwards, they revert back to inactive. That's what happened and created the high number of inactives, and you saw across the board, across the state, every clerk in every city and town was going, we're gonna have a high number of inactives coming out for election. or
Can you say
primary."
that again, because I
Yeah.
didn't follow
Do the-
you?
Do the timeframe again?
February, March.
Whenever the census goes out, it starts a cycle where people are all inactive, everybody. Understanding that concept, when you send out the census, we'll say third week of February, the presidential primary happens on March 6th. If they vote, that puts them back to active status no matter what they're doing.
Okay.
But then by answering the census, they become inactive.
They become inactive?
So you
Inactive.
vote, so you vote in the primary.
Right.
The presidential primary.
That's correct.
We know they vote on the primary.
That's right.
Then they don't send in the census.
Whether they sent the census in or
No,
not.
let me, I want to
Okay,
check out
go
this
ahead.
example.
I'm sorry.
My example is, and they don't send in the census, then they go to inactive?
That's one scenario. Every other person, every census, every person on the census is inactive. They all start as inactives.
Everybody.
Anyway, it doesn't matter that they voted on March 6th. See, usually in the usual cycle, we don't have an election or a primary until like September. By that time, all the census stuff is done. And the primary really kind of helps all of us by taking those people who may be inactive and making them active, which is one event that does it. And that by the time they get the election, they don't have that backup. We average about 1,000 people per election usually who are inactive, not 5,000. And when you have 5,000 people who are inactive, there's required statutory signatured paperwork that has to be filled out. That caused the delay in every city and town.
Hold on, and we have this question later on, too, so I just want to,
Can you just go through, and I'm not trying to sound ignorant, but in February, when the census is issued, every voter is deemed inactive till they complete that census?
Right, once we get the census back,
Okay, so I don't complete the census and I go to vote in the presidential primary, that makes me active?
the voting has nothing to do with it. If you receive the census afterwards and don't
Okay.
return it, as Councilor Rivera was suggesting, it's inactive. From the standpoint of the clerk's office, everybody, once we sent the census out, is inactive, everybody. Until I get something back from the voter, a census, a voting form, someone comes in, changes their registration, someone re-registers, someone updates their registration form, signs a petition, does something to basically be active, they remain inactive until they show up.
Let's say I do that, I vote in the presidential primary and I return my census, I should be showing up as an active voter?
That's correct. That's,
But
you
what
got it.
about people that voted in September?
of the prior year.
No, didn't we have, I mean, we had the presidentials in November, but didn't we have state primaries in?
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, state primary.
Right,
So it's one ballot.
No, it was a party,
party-driven primary,
party election. It was
That's
three
the March,
ballots.
that's the March election, right?
both were.
But come September of 2012, we had a primary.
Yeah.
I voted for state rep in a state primary.
Yeah,
Probably Democrat.
I did pull a Democratic ballot, but, so, but
Not
by,
important.
would that make me, exactly, by doing that, does that make me active again, right?
Right.
right.
So even though it's no longer a state election, now it's a federal election in November, I should be showing up as active.
That's correct.
Okay, so I have people that are telling me that they did vote in September and then showed up in November as inactive. How does that,
That is a common complaint, and again, I can't tell you it is 100% foolproof. Are there errors made? No. There are, certainly, but it's not to the degree that most people amplify it to. The bigger contributing factor here was that the census went out after the March presidential primary, which basically puts everybody at ground zero.
So let's do this, because I think that there's a lot of things that we're running past, and I don't want to,
thank you.
the data is another point to it. So going back to this issue of the inactive voter, because I think I'm all set with the staffing. The number that were scheduled, you said that the people that you added at the end were these students
College students.
that you trained on the Saturday before?
No, from that number, only 4 get the training. 16 didn't.
So so you thought there's gonna be more, let me get some more people.
Yeah,
You did that the Saturday before, you thought.
yeah, the weekend before.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
Yeah, and on Monday, we sent the memo to the mayor, the mayor approved it.
No chance that you would have thought that you would have been able to see that many more people coming, that you could have maybe had chance to train
I
these
think
people.
Raphael and I talked about this,
Two
what, Saturday, Friday,
months
Saturday?
before.
We scheduled a training for Monday, Monday, the day before the election,
Right.
just for those people who missed the training.
Yeah.
But we got only 4 or 5 people at the training.
Yeah, but I know, I want to ask a different question. I'm glad you guys caught it the Saturday before,
Okay.
right? That's good. My question is, couldn't have there been anything that you could have done to seen it 4 weeks before?
We knew it was gonna be higher, but we didn't know it was gonna be that much higher.
What was the telltale sign?
The numbers that we started seeing coming
Yeah,
in,
we see-
17,000 inactive voters, it was, it
But you-
persisted, it
Saturday,
persisted.
what did you see Saturday then?
Raphael did.
What numbers?
You can see, you can predict detail now. When you see the people come to your office to vote absentee, if you see the people showing at the office to vote absentee and the people making phone calls, where is my polling location, where I gotta vote, you can say, hey,
Get a
detail now will
sense.
be on this way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and these are bellwethers, and we watch for these.
It was almost 54%. It was very high.
All right, so, okay.
Can I ask a question
About the staffing?
about the inactive voters?
We're gonna come to that in a minute.
I'm sorry,
Yeah,
okay.
we're gonna come to that,
Oh,
sorry
wait.
about that. And so this question about how many first-time wardens and clerks do we have?
No one. All was,
You sure?
I'm sure. All
I-
wardens are great workers.
I don't wanna get the lady in trouble, but I was at least in 2 locations where she's like, this is the first time I've been awarded. She was a clerk before, but she'd never been awarded.
Where?
I know,
No. No, she was.
She was-
No, there's no way you can know what I'm
She was
talking
awarded in
about.
September.
There's no way you know what I'm talking about.
I know.
well, okay,
But
There's
I
no way
made-
you guys
I
know what I'm
made
talking
two
about.
switch-
we'll talk about that one
To
later.
switch from Waldings that, well, Waldings in September for half a day, and Waldings in November. But no one was the first time.
I would go back and check it, because the point of that is that those people are the people that end up running the show. And when there's arguments and people get angry at each other, and those are the people that call the police in to stop people. And if you have people who've never been a warden during an election, it causes a lot of havoc. And that's exactly what was going on in the 2 places.
In November.
Let's talk about it, because I definitely,
I'm 100% sure no one
All right.
in November.
Let's
because
check
that's a bad policy to have somebody.
Let's check it, and, you know,
Yeah.
maybe someone's trying to impress you.
No, I'm 100% sure no one.
No, they weren't trying to impress me, trust me. That was not an impressive sight. That was not an impressive sight. Okay. So we saw some telltale signs the Saturday before the national election for president that there was gonna be a lot of people, and we brought in the cavalry, 20 people, 16 people that we didn't train.
An effort was made,
Okay, good.
and an effort was made to have reserve beyond that.
Yeah, except that what you got was what you got.
That's what happened.
Yeah. Is there eligibility, what makes it, can just anybody work the polls, can be a poll worker or a
You have to be
warden?
a registered voter,
Yeah.
and you have to be a registered voter in the city of Lawrence. We have a couple still that, you know, they move out of Lawrence, they move back, they move out of Lawrence, sometimes they.
Yeah, but in state election, the Secretary of State say you can use people as soon as they are registered in Massachusetts.
Right.
They have a right to work.
Yeah.
We made a choice to choose the Lawrence resident first. But we ran out of poll workers in Lawrence, we can go to Methuen, around people living around the city.
Cool. And so and if you have questions about the polling workers, just, anybody can just jump in. So what's a poll worker earn a day?
120 for a day,
That's just the
20
poll worker?
poll workers, yeah. $120 for a day, 20 for the extra hours when we had the state election, the hour from 7 to 8, and 20 for the training.
Do the clerk get paid more?
Clerk is 160, 20 for the extra hour when the state election, and 20 for the training.
That's the clerk. And how about the
wardens,
warden?
200 for a day, and 20 and 20. And the last election, they didn't get paid for the cell phone. But
Didn't get paid for what?
to use their own cell
Oh,
phone.
yeah. A cell
But
phone
before,
stipend?
we pay for the cell phone.
Cell phone stipend, okay.
Can I just, a point of information?
Sure.
Just so you're aware, at the ordinance committee right now, there was a issue brought onto our agenda by a civilian, not a counselor, that was questioning the flat rate of the poll workers, but that is established, that it's been a flat rate. I guess most communities do it as a flat rate too, but it is funny that it's being discussed here only because it's at ordinance committee right now as well. We did ask the city attorney just to wait and make sure we're not violating any
Labor laws?
labor laws.
Counselor, that was brought by a warden, in fact, who works for us,
Yeah.
and we're being told by council that the FSLA does not apply,
Does not.
does not.
But we'll wait for the official response,
I'm
right?
waiting for the official
Yeah,
response.
so we don't
but
want to make
I
statement.
won't go that far then.
Thanks.
But what the last thing is that, I've checked with all communities, there's no community that charges any way other than a flat rate.
Flat stipend, okay. No, good to know.
I'm glad to know that we're working that out in the ordinance committee. So that's the pricing for it. And so the trainings you had, it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 trainings?
We had,
Actually,
we, yeah,
So why didn't you put 9?
I didn't put 9 because there were 2 additional ones. We did it informally with a couple of the wardens who couldn't make the other trainings. I put in at the end that we
What dates
schedule
were-
additional.
what dates were they?
Additional trainings are scheduled individually with poll workers upon request,
What-
and we do that.
So what dates were the other
That was
2?
on Monday following, whatever that number is.
Monday before the election, and Friday,
So November 11/5, you had one?
on Friday before the election.
11/1.
Yeah, one on Friday, one on Monday.
11/1 is here. 3, 6, 7, 8.
Monday 5th,
Oh, yeah, 11/7, it's 11/2.
and Friday 2nd.
Okay, 9 trainings. And you're saying of the 188, everybody went to a training?
All but 3,
Yeah, we missed 3.
All but 3?
Yeah.
And those 3 people worked,
Yeah,
yes,
and those 3 people got paid?
yeah.
yes, but not for training.
Not for training. Not the $20. Training.
Yeah, no, I get it. I get it. I'm not so concerned that you didn't pay them, I'm concerned they didn't get trained.
Oh,
If you would've paid them and they didn't get trained, that would've been a problem too,
Oh,
but
no, yeah.
I'm more concerned that they didn't get the training. I'm not concerned that they got paid.
okay.
Oh, I am too, but if we knock off anybody for training, it would be even more disastrous.
That's your opinion?
That's, is my opinion.
Okay, good.
Absolutely, it's,
I just wanna make sure that, because that,
but less.
there's
less
probably
people-
another school of thought on
Less
that, but I
people
don't
is
know.
less workers.
Yeah, no, I got you. So 3 people, no training. You had to get more people anyway.
No doubt.
Okay.
Put the word out, please.
So what was it that was part of the mandatory training? I know you gave us something, I'm just not sure what it was.
I usually go over, and I've been hammering away at inactives and active voters, and I do that with every election, but I also included in your materials, not only how the inactive and provisional voting occurs, but also the poll worker manual, so we pick and select any other item that the poll workers want to talk about or find out about. We also impart information
Okay.
about what's transmitted to us from the Secretary of State, any nuances, any differences. Certainly our cautions and concerns about the size of the ballots were imparted at these training sessions because there were 2 ballots. And also how to repair the machines should the ballots jam it up, which in the other communities, if you remember from news reports, were jamming consistently. Our poll workers knew how to fix the machines, to keep them operational, to keep lines at a minimum. The other issue that I wanted to address, and I want to start addressing with some regularity, is tallying. It seems to be a lost art in our community for some reason. I think because of the nuance of the AccuVote machine optical readers. So we prepared a number of ballots, mock ballots, provided to them to show them the size and the form of the ballots that were going to come up for the election.
Can I stop you for a second?
Sure.
Okay, so when I'm looking at this packet, right, there's poll worker manual, and that's everything that you gave a poll worker.
We leave that in the transfer cases, but we also take up issues or topics.
Let me ask the question again.
Yeah,
There's a packet in here, it says poll manual,
yep.
poll worker
it.
manual. And I gotta do this quick. Poll manual. City of Lawrence State Election, Tuesday, November 6th, poll manual, clerk's journal, and record payroll count. Do you give that to every single worker?
No, we put it to the,
Okay, hold on a
we put
second.
it in the transfer case.
To the Walden.
All right, so when I go to training as a worker for a poll, as a clerk, as a warden,
Right.
when I leave training, what do I have in my hand?
If you back up from that section, 2 pages, what I handed out were the provisional voting inactive standards, state
Those two
law
things?
and procedures. I also handed them a copy of a sample tally sheet to be
Yeah.
used at the polls that they had tactically, and I showed and demonstrated how to do it. Mr. Tejeda and I actually ran through a training session where, if you back up even further, sample ballots were marked and were shown how to be counted by hand.
Yeah, and then the ballot handling flyer?
Right.
Yeah.
So that material was handed out to the poll workers. At the training, each poll worker at the
When they
training.
left to go home the day of the training, not the day they went to work,
They went to training,
they had
that material.
this material.
Except for the sample ballots, I kept those and used them over and over and over
You
again.
didn't have the sample back, they didn't have the
I
sample.
passed them around.
All right, good, that's okay. All right, I'd like to entertain a motion for recess.
So move.
Second.
Just gonna be a 5-minute recess. All those in favor? Aye. The ayes have it, thank you. Sorry about that. All those in favor? Aye. The ayes have it. Back out of recess. All right. Moving right along here. Hey, just a follow-up question, Mr. Clerk, Mr. Tejeda. Is there different training for clerks and wardens from poll workers, or they all get the same training?
Same.
All right.
Sometimes if the issues are particularized, we had one a couple of years ago, we trained only the wardens and trained them separately, had different sessions.
You pay them more, right?
Yeah, but I mean, again, for particular things that they had to do, for something that would be different that they had to do, we did train them for that.
Again, like, when we talk about this, I know that we're going through this, like, part by part, but this thing all happens together. And that's why it all happens all together in the same voting location. All these people work together. All these processes have to come together. It all comes together, which is why I was concerned that you don't have, like, a coordinating meeting, because even though they're separate things, it all kind of comes together that day. And so when I think about training everybody together, I think, well, if there's a problem with a poll worker, did we train the clerk or the warden to deal with that? If there's an altercation with a voter and a poll worker, did we train the warden to deal with that? If there's an issue of, like, having to come up on a decision on a voting matter, where somebody may not be franchised or disenfranchised, did we train the warden to deal with that? We may train the workers to, like, check off lists and make sure everybody's on that, but did we, because it was intense.
What I try to do is try to cover each poll worker to deal with issues as if they were clerks or wardens. Wardens certainly have more experience, probably older than both of us put together, in terms of their service, and are well-seasoned as to what their obligations are. And clerks and wardens, to not so much earn their pay, are charged with greater responsibility, certainly, and make those decisions.
I'll tell you what, that's this concern. Because you're giving them more responsibility, you're paying them more.
That's right.
I would think you want to give them different information, but that's okay.
I try and train everybody as if they're going to be confronted.
Yeah.
Or deal with issues.
That's good. Information was also provided regarding about how the AccuVote machine would. So they did have training on how to fix the ballots if they got jammed, all that stuff.
Yes.
Everybody. So
Yes.
in these sessions, were there big sessions of people? You had 184 people trained across 9 trainings, across 7 trainings, 7 trainings.
We get more for the first day than we do toward the end.
All right.
For some reason, they don't like the library.
All right. Okay. So there is a poll manual in the transfer case of the box.
Right.
That they can just go and look it up.
Available, absolutely, and I encourage them to use it. In fact, they're required to. The clerks are required to use it, the wardens are required to use it to make notations of odd happenings. As evidence.
Okay. Then we're out to the next question is data. Councilor Brunel's ready to go on that one. We talked about what constitutes an inactive voter, but you gave us the general law and the name. So an inactive voter is defined by Mass General Law section, no?
Chapter
Chapter
General Law
51, Section 37A, as follows. The name and address of a voter that is not entered in the annual register pursuant to Section 37 shall be maintained on an inactive voter list. That means that if you didn't get part on the census is our annual register,
That's correct,
our annual register.
that's correct.
If you're not on the annual register by way of the census, you shall be put on an inactive voter list.
Right.
Until such voter has failed to vote in 2 consecutive biannual state election and has thereafter been notified by mail of such removal. So you get put on this list, you're on this list for 2 years.
Back up just a little. First thing that has to happen is we have to send you notice. You didn't answer the census, confirmation notice. Those are little green cards that you voted, your constituents tell you, geez, I got this card, what do I do? Ask me if I'm still living here, or did I move?
Census,
Check it off, you send it back, you're back on the list.
okay?
2 biennial elections occur after that,
That's
4
4
years.
years?
Then you are subject to being deleted. In fact, we conduct deletion sessions.
And any time during those 4 years, I return the census, I'm back on.
That's correct. Or vote, or sign a petition,
Or vote,
or there's a number of things you can do.
or vote, what else?
Re-register, update your registration, change your party,
Change address.
change address.
Oh, that's a lot, hold on. So, you can vote, you can re-register, you can sign a petition?
Maybe if you put it in the other, in the catch-all, which we say, you do anything as a voter, you do anything with us as a voter, anything, you're back on as an active voter, anything.
I'd rather delineate them if that's okay
Okay.
with you. So, sign a petition,
Nomination paper,
nomination paper.
return a confirmation notice.
So an inactive voter can sign a nomination paper and then boom, they're active.
Right.
But if they show up to vote the day of the election, they have to show you where they live?
Not necessarily. They gotta tell you, because it's done by address,
No, but they gotta have proof of residence of.
not if they're active. If
Okay,
they're in,
you gotta listen to the whole thing then.
if they're inactive,
If you're an inactive voter, if somebody signs a nomination paper,
Should get bumped.
boom, they become active.
right,
But if I'm inactive and I show up to the election day poll and they find me on my sheet and they say, oh, you're inactive, I gotta show you proof that I live at that address?
that's correct.
Yeah, correct.
Wow.
Through you, Mr. Chairman.
We're gonna get some nomination papers to some inactive people, get them active. Counselor Vasquez.
Yeah, thank you. Let's say, for instance, a person is inactive, but they moved recently.
Yeah.
You know, within 2 weeks of an election. Are they still able to vote in that
Yes.
previous address?
Yes. There's a 6-month grace period by statute, that when we get the list, someone who recently moved, for instance, that happens a lot, in fact. Someone goes across the street and says, geez, I like this place, I used to live over there, but I now live here, can I vote here? We have a master list, each poll location says, geez, you're registered over at that other location. If you go there, you're on that list. You'll be able to vote, you're fine. But if you vote here, you have to vote provisional because you're not on this precinct's list.
And that's only allowed within that 6-month grace period.
Where you live January 1 until you re-register at a new location?
Start again?
I'm not quite sure what the question
You can vote where
is.
you lived on January 1 in the fall elections unless you re-register, like, let's say you moved to Methuen. But in January 1, you lived in Lawrence, and you have not re-registered in Methuen, you can vote in Lawrence, because you have, under the state law, can't, I mean, you have,
It-
6 months before.
So let's do it differently.
The statute says 6 months.
Well, let's do it differently. What do you do? What do we do here in Lawrence?
We do what the statute says. 6 months previous, within that 6 months is a great, you have 180 days to re-register from the time you move.
So I move January 1st.
Yeah,
I have till June 1st
right.
to register where
It's
I,
actually a look back from the date of the election, not from January 1st.
that didn't help me, so let me finish my
Yeah.
question. So January 1st, I live in Lawrence. In Methuen. No, let me do Lawrence. I live in Lawrence. I move to Methuen. I don't register in Methuen by June 1st. September primary, where can I vote?
Our look back is from the date of the election, did you re-register? Technically, you're not supposed to vote. In that scenario, it's likely that the person's still on the rolls in Lawrence.
Yep.
That's
So can
likely.
but they're not supposed to vote.
Then they're not supposed to vote.
Anybody currently lives outside the city for more than
That's-
60 days,
No, 180,
180 days.
right. From the
180
date of the
days.
election, backwards. Back counting. The
So
election-
November 6th, 180 days back.
Previous, that's right. Now, some people are astute enough and say, geez, that person moved to Methuen, I'm gonna challenge that ballot. The ballot gets challenged. Voter can, anybody can challenge it if they get information, that's a legitimate challenge, that person doesn't live in Lawrence anymore. Doesn't mean the ballot doesn't go through. That ballot still goes through the ballot box, by law. There's a misnomer that challenging ballots will stop a ballot or a voter who is on the inactive list from voting. The other misnomer, that's the biggest one, is,
Before we go to the second one,
okay,
because that's a big thing you just said.
yes,
They challenge the vote paper still goes through the machine?
that's correct.
Doesn't go in a little yellow envelope?
Nope.
What makes it go into the envelope?
That's when someone is not on the voting list, garden variety. Someone's not on the voting list anywhere, can't find them. Say, okay, you can still vote, you have to vote provisional, goes in the envelope, set aside.
So if someone challenges my ballot, I am still entitled to stuff it in the ballot box?
Absolutely.
I'm telling you as a
That
fact.
does not happen,
That
yeah.
does not happen here.
It's happening, there are instances where I've seen it even myself at the polls that it's not happening, but as a general proposition, you're incorrect, it is happening. That's one of the biggest misconceptions that I've been turning around for the last 8 years.
Well, I'll tell you what, I think this is why we need to train wardens and clerks separately, because that is a big deal and it's not
We
happening.
do that in every session, and the sheet you have, we do it every session.
Yeah, listen, I'm telling you again, if you do not segregate out the leaders of these polling locations from the rest of the group and train them differently, Mr. Clerk, you're gonna have big problems like you had this last time.
I disagree. I think
Of
that we
course you
train
do.
every one
Of
of
course you
them to
disagree
do
with me.
the same
Because
thing
you're gonna
consistently.
say to me that you didn't do anything wrong last time, and that's okay.
It's
You-
not the
whatever
ward,
you-
it's not the wardens or the
Mr.
clerks that
Clerk,
make
I'm
the
not done
decision.
speaking. And I know, and you're gonna say that there wasn't much more that you could have done to make it any better. That's your position. What I'm saying to you, and let me tell you something, I would also tell you that, take constructive criticism, because if you don't, then it seems like you can't listen to folks. So what I'm suggesting to you is that if you don't train the leaders in these situations differently than you train everybody else, I would say giving them more training than them, you're gonna have problems. And this is one of those things, that people go and they get challenged and they're being disenfranchised because their ballot doesn't go in the box, it goes in an envelope. I'm telling you, as a person who's.
And I'm telling
and-
you, it's not happening because I see it in the provisional ballots.
I know, it's not happening.
Not to the degree you're suggesting.
No.
Because
It
I
should-
count the provisional
But
ballots.
Mr. Clerk, can we agree it shouldn't happen at all?
If I see it once in the provisional ballots this past election, that was too many. I did
Shouldn't
not
happen.
see it once in the provisionals.
Absolutely.
Can I ask you a question through you, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, Councilor Bueno.
All right, so it's been established that if my ballot is contested, as I go to vote, someone's like, oh, you live in North Andover. I said, no, I don't. I live right on Mount Vernon Street. They say, no, so my ballot's been challenged. I'm entitled to put it into the ballot box.
Absolutely.
And how do you know it was challenged? Do you mark it before it goes into the ballot box, or?
Well, the people who process the challenges are not necessarily the clerks or the wardens as being assumed. It is the poll workers that do the grunt work. Someone says, I want to challenge that ballot, they send them over to the warden and to the clerk. And they say, why do you want to challenge it? Because she's not living in Lawrence like she says. What's your challenge? Challenger says, not at that address, not registered. CV, on the back of the ballot, they flip it over, they're instructed to do it, CV, challenge voter. They put the name of the person who's challenging and the address.
Right
And-
on the ballot?
Yes.
Okay,
And the name of the voter.
okay.
Then the voter is instructed, go back to the ballot box and cast the ballot. It gets counted, it goes into the machine.
Okay.
If I would see anything different, it would show up in the provisional ballots. It hasn't been happening for about 2 years.
Through you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor
I see them, I
Vasquez.
count the ballots.
Councilor Vasquez?
So, let's say if there was an election that was very, 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 very close.
Yeah.
And we've seen it here for, in which councilors have won for, by 9 votes in previous elections. So if there were an X amount of votes that were challenged because of residents who did not live in the city of Lawrence or were not registered, yet they said, yes, I still live here, I'm still registered here, those votes are counted
Right.
through the machine. But then if the challenge is correct and they are not registered here, how are those votes going to be taken back?
Shots
Say it again?
have to overturn.
There are
I'm not sure what he said.
The judge have to overturn the,
Oh, a judge.
There are 2 methods of tracking that ballot. Now, it's marked on the back of the ballot, but it's in the case. And the other one is affirmation of current continuous residence, because we're talking about an inactive voter, right? So, the
think
ballot is
we're talking
found.
about both.
The only way to find the ballot is to go through a recount.
Yeah.
Those ballots are collected at the recount and set aside for further action, which then the candidate is required to file suit.
I think we're talking about not just contested living, I think we're talking about all contested ballots.
Any
I don't-
contested ballot cannot be overturned unless a judge overturns it.
So, okay, so I'm at the poll, somebody, what's another reason besides address that somebody can contest?
You're not the person,
I'm not, they say, I'm not who they think I am.
insufficient ID.
I'm not the
That's
person
not
who
Dan
they,
Rivera, he's too handsome.
I'm not the person, yeah, that definitely would happen. I'm not the person that I'm saying I am.
Right, right.
I take the ballot, what's supposed to happen is the poll worker's supposed to put CV,
CV, challenge voter,
the name of the person who's challenging me,
right. Address.
and add their address,
Yes?
maybe their phone number too.
No,
some type
no,
of
no, 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 no.
information.
I want to keep it short and sweet.
All right, their address.
For
I take
summons.
the ballot, I go and I vote, it goes in the box.
And then the lists are marked as well, CV, challenge
Lists are
voter,
marked.
challenge voter.
And
All right.
through you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
And I, as the challenger, I am correct. The person I challenge is not the
Wasn't
person
Amy.
whom he's saying he is.
How do we find out?
The only way to find out is through a recount.
But how do we have,
Only way.
Record
The
of-
other way is to sue the entire election process,
and
saying
how,
it's incorrectly done.
and how will we go, because
That's been proposed.
but in this case, I don't think that the election process was wrong. It was the voter, the fraudulent voter
Yeah.
who was wrong. And how do we identify that
Burden
fraudulent?
of proof rests with you, not with the voter.
Here's the other,
very difficult.
here's the other test.
Test.
And I'd like to do this as a formal motion. I want to know how many voters were challenged in the last election. Because, according to you, every one of them should be marked on the list.
Should be.
Okay.
Yeah, through the voting list.
All right.
We'll get the
I'd like
staff
to
on
hear.
that.
I'd like to hear it. And then I want to also, I think I asked for the total number of provisional ballots. I'm not sure that's in the
Thought I
answers.
put it in there.
I didn't,
I may have
it may
missed
still be in
That's easy.
there.
That's not a
But you see what I'm
problem.
saying, like, I think
It's
that.
about 350, 360.
Okay. Which you gotta understand, to me, sounds super low.
That means the poll workers are doing their job.
Okay. All right. All right, we beat that one to death.
And,
Go ahead.
through you, Mr. Chairman. A challenge vote could come from literally anyone in the community. It doesn't have to be a poll worker, just for clarification purposes, right?
It can be. It typically comes from an observer. Someone is, you gotta be at the poll.
But the poll worker can do it. I am inactive voters. I came to vote. They asked me for an ID or something to tie me to the address. I don't have nothing. They let me vote, but they had to challenge
By law.
because I don't have nothing to tie me to the address.
Yeah.
They had to challenge the ballot for the reason no ID cast the ballot.
And
Cast the
and
ballot
that's
had
a
to challenge.
mandatory challenge. That's required by statute. All poll workers know it. They're trained to do it.
What's a mandatory challenge?
When a voter is required to show ID, they're inactive and don't show a sufficient ID. An ID is defined by statute, you know, the bill.
You mandatory, so I'm on the inactive list.
Right.
I say, oh, I'm really living there. I don't show
I don't have an ID.
an ID.
So you should get to vote?
Still
So
get to
you-
vote.
So you vote, and then on the back of the car, on the back of the voter thing, it should say challenge voter.
yeah.
No one has to say anything, right? It should happen automatically.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And they're trained to do that. Can I say it happens 100% of the time? Geez, I wish there were 24 of me, and I'd stand there over them and scream if they don't.
Can I just, through you, Mr.
Counsel-
Chair?
Councilor Brunel?
I know in my district, we have very experienced poll workers. I vote in E2, and the poll staff is excellent. They're kind and courteous, and I think they stand on their heads to be nice to people.
And
I've seen them offer
to franchise
people
them.
who seem sick water, like, I mean, these are good people, and I don't mean to disparage them. I guess that's what I'm trying to say, but a young woman that we all know, including the poll workers, came in and was on the inactive list. She lived at home. She happened to also be a student at UMass Lowell. She lived with her folks, and she was on the inactive list. And they said, I'm going to call her Susie. Susie, we know it's you, but you're on the inactive list, so you can't vote without an ID. And she says, my wallet's up in my apartment at Lowell, and that's not her residence, that's just her student, whatever. I have to go all the way to Lowell to get my ID. She should have been able to vote and just had her thing marked CV, from what I understand you say.
That's correct. I've had poll workers stand there while I was standing there saying, geez, you're on the inactive list, you can't vote.
Okay, so that's
seen
not
it.
correct.
I think you're making
It's
a
not the
point,
correct
Ms. Clark.
method of doing,
So what the poll worker should do is say, Susie, we're gonna mark this CV since you don't have the ID, even though we all know you and know exactly who
it's
you
gonna be an
are.
automatic challenge, but the ballot's going through the box, correct.
The ballot's going through the box.
That's correct.
That's what I needed to hear.
And that's what we
'Cause
train.
the funny thing is, we actually went in and talked to the poll workers, and the poll worker said, I know Susie, who's not, and I know her mom and dad, and I know where they live, and she's definitely in E2, but since she's on the inactive list and doesn't have any ID, I can't let her vote.
If I could clone 250 members of my staff to stand there and do that, I'd love to.
See, Mr.
Some
Clerk-
poll workers are better than
Hold on,
others,
hold on a second.
some are not as
Can't
good
just
as
let you
others.
say that, Mr. Clerk. That's why you have training.
Yeah.
So that
That's
you don't
right.
have to wish that you were there everywhere. You train them better.
But is
That's
there,
what you do.
like, a piece of paper that says that, like a,
No, there's not.
like,
Yes,
inactive voter, because just having watched this poor kid, like, I feel like if you're 20 years old and you want to vote, I want to encourage you to do that. I feel like it's so hard to get young people to vote as it is. And, you know, this young person.
they walk out of training with this, inactive voters. I encourage them to continue to reading it. I put it in the training manuals. I
Okay.
drill in their heads. The first year I started working here, the chant was from the poll workers, inactive voters cannot vote.
Yeah,
It's taken this long to get it to the point where they're actually, for the most part, like I said, I never deal with in 100% of superlatives.
yeah.
Not everybody, I've had people in this past election, reports of poll workers saying you can't vote at all on the inactive list.
Because it just surprises me that that is the correct solution, only because the poll workers have been there, some of them 20 years, as long as I've been voting, and they're good people, like, they're not like trying to be jerks, they're genuinely good people that are just misinformed. So how
agree.
they could be so misinformed for so long that's the concern to me.
That's my
Yeah.
Just
biggest
for
concern.
clarity, nowhere in the document you're talking about does it say that the poll worker must allow the person to vote. If you want, I can read it from the top, I just did. An inactive
You have
vote-
to understand that an active voter is a registered voter.
Yeah.
If you don't let a registered voter vote, you're doing something wrong. So I don't know where,
I don't disagree with you. I'm just saying that if this is the only piece of information that poll workers have to go
this is
off of.
processing. I scream at the top of my lungs in the sessions, inactive voters are registered voters.
Okay. So again, I'm gonna go back. If I look at this piece of paper as my answer to my questions, it does not tell me that I have to let them vote. It tells me all the things that I have to collect from them.
Probably you can find that part on the, this challenging voter. On the challenging voters, you can find that part.
I don't see it. I'm looking at the three pieces of paper we just described that were handed out, and it says specifically,
Well-
inactive,
Challenging voters.
Well, what you're suggesting assumes that an active voter can't vote. And if there's a poll worker that believes that, they can't work for me.
yeah. Again, I'm not trying to make broad statements, I'm just saying, if I went to look for this as my guide for inactive voters, it's really clear. The voting lists must be there, you have the voting list. The check-in process for inactive voters involves a number of steps. The pertinent regulation states, if the name, address, or party enrollment of a person claiming the right to vote appear on the voting list as an inactive voter, the presiding officer shall allow such inactive voter to vote upon a written affirmation by the inactive voter of his current and continuous residency in the municipality signed under the penalties of perjury. So they have to sign that affirmation of current and continuous residency. And that should allow them to vote.
That's it.
And then an inactive voter must, and so this is, I think, where it gets, if I were you, I'd pull that out of there, because that's kind of apparent. Then everything else that's like bolded is the affirmation of current and continuous residency. If the voter's name is on the inactive voters, the poll worker will also request identification containing the voter's name and current address. The elected official must challenge the voter's ballot. This could be clearer.
So they challenge their ballot, which is the process we talked about, marking it with the CV and, but putting it in the box.
That's it.
If the voter
I want it editorialized, but I bet you $20 that I could go to any one of the wardens and they won't be able to tell you how that process is.
If the voter have an ID next to the name and doesn't have an ID, they have to vote provisional. That's different.
Oh, on the,
People who say, mark it down on the voting list, an ID,
ID?
they are the first time voter. And they have to show an ID. If they don't have an ID, they gotta vote provisional.
Who has to vote provisional?
The voters on the voting list with ID next to the name. Just in a black letter, say ID. Those people are the first time voter. The first time voter has to show an ID. They don't, they gotta vote provisional. No challenge. That is different than in active voters.
So
that's interesting, man, that's interesting.
a first-time voter has to show ID?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's under the 2004 American Act, anybody who registers to vote, will hold an ID next to their name. And basically, if they don't provide an ID, they will have to take the process of voting provisional.
Okay.
And those votes are only counted in a challenge.
No, no,
They don't count never.
they don't count, because they didn't show an ID, first of all. They
what's
go
pro-
before the
no
Board of
count.
registrars.
Oh, and then they get counted if the voter registers it, say it's
Board of
okay.
registrars makes a determination independently and vote as to whether or not that vote should count.
That's interesting. When they find out where they vote, do you tell them that they have to show up with an ID?
Yeah, usually,
On the first-time registration,
when we register them, the acknowledgement that we send them out,
Says it?
it says it.
Cool. That's interesting. I did not know that. All right, good. This is healthy. I like this. We're learning. All right. So again, after hearing all that about the inactive voters, stuff like that, my constructive criticism, Mr. Clerk, is that you can make that clearer to people, and that you should train the clerks and the wardens differently from everybody else.
we do and we will. Further,
Okay. I think this is where a lot of the grief happens, and only because I work with data in my job, and I pull lists all the time. So it is possible that you pull a list one day, and then you save that list, you send it to be printed, you do all this other stuff, and then, you send one list to the printers for printing, and you end up pulling an older list you end up printing by mistake that has all the data different. That's why I asked you to talk about how you pull the list, what are the timelines, to make sure that when you pull that primary list to have it printed, that's the most current list. How do you verify that? And you're not pulling last year's primary
Right.
list.
understand, the CVR system, Central Voter Registry System,
Yeah.
changes every day, every single day. You're right. And I share your concern all the time. Mr. Tejeda, certainly anybody on the election staff, pull down or order voting lists on the date that they're ordered after registration closes 20 days before the election by statute. That voting list not only is frozen in time on its order and is filtered as to the close of registration date and can be retrieved not only from the Secretary of State, but when we save it, I date it. And I date it the date we drawn and received as to
So-
voting lists.
You pull a list from the CVR, and it's everybody registered to vote prior and including the date, last date of registration.
That's correct. I can have Mr. Tejeda explain it in more detail if you'd prefer.
No, then you save that down and you date it.
If
So everybody knows.
when I get a copy, I put it back in Excel and I date it as to what it's for, what date we drew it down. And if I have any doubt, I order it again or I get another one as to the one that was ordered from the CVR itself.
Okay.
It's frozen in
Then
time.
you send that to be printed so that it has the check-in sheets.
In-out sheets, in-out check-ins, that's correct. Active, inactive lists, it's all there.
how do you know you got the right number of people on the list? You don't, you just, whatever CVR
It-
says is
it-
true?
We still get, like, for instance, naturalized citizens, even right up to the Friday before the election. We're being sworn in. How did that work? The day before.
Or wait, you're talking about something else, I'm not hearing.
Well, they're not added onto the list. We don't know who they are until they actually come in to register. So they're not gonna be on that list.
Okay, so, yeah, I'm not sure I think you answered a different question. How do you know that you have the right number of registered voters on your list?
I can only rely upon the CVR system for its reliance, as to its accuracy.
That's it. So because every time you register somebody to vote, you put it in CVR.
Yes,
And what you take out is what CVR says. That's the golden standard.
that's correct.
Now, there could be people that are eligible to vote on election day because of different reasons, as long if they're not on the list, right?
That happens.
And one of them, you were talking about people who were naturalized. Afterwards, they're allowed to vote, even though they're not registered.
After the cutoff day, they are allowed to vote. After the cutoff day, they are allowed to vote. What we do is we make a list, and we send the list with the voting list to the polling location with the voter ID number. If they had any doubt, they gotta call the office and giving to us the voter ID in order to make sure the voter is allowed to vote.
So CVR gives you a list the day of the election, or the day before the election, whatever date, time frame, and you get a list of all naturalized citizens that can vote in our area.
Yeah, we put it into the system, those voters, in order to get the voter ID.
Okay, so I got sworn in, so October 24th, I think was the day the
Yeah.
last, you could register to vote. And then, so I get sworn in October 26th. I can then come with my voter registration, give it to you, you put it in. You pull the list, I'm not gonna show up on it, but you know because I'm a first
I
time.
know you are a first-time voter, you are registered to vote.
We usually add them in manually, as you come in and you bring your nationalized papers, we'll register you, we'll give you the acknowledgement letter. We'll give you an acknowledgement letter.
Start at the beginning again.
Usually when the new citizen comes in, they'll bring in the citizenship papers and stuff, we'll register them, give them the acknowledgement, and we'll add them on the list manually
Yeah.
by putting their voter ID, the address, and the name, so the poll workers would know that those people were added in, and they
Yeah,
will
when
be
you
allowed
say
to
you
vote.
add them manually, do you add them manually by,
Writing them in,
with a pen,
yes. Red pen,
a red pen?
yes.
You can only use red.
And they know that that person was put on there by you guys?
Yes.
And not by somebody else?
Because we're the only one who have access to the voter ID of the voter. The poll workers won't have that on hand.
And it has to have an ID number. It's not just written in. Poll workers are not allowed to write in names.
Yeah. That's interesting. All right. That looks like that's a little loose, but I guess nobody really knows what the numbers are anyway, so that doesn't really matter. Okay, the next one was, unless people have any questions about that, the whole process about pulling the lists, printing the names. All right,
Come
well,
to the trainings.
well, I'm not really sure you'd get answers.
Yeah, you will.
I did have I know we were
Go ahead.
just saying, we're gonna request the number of challenged voters and requesting the number of provisional voters in that last election. I know we said on November of 2012, we had roughly 17,000 inactive voters on election day, and 5,000 of those inactive voters, oh, my light's off. Sorry, Bill. On election day, we had 17,000 inactive voters, and 5,000 of them actually showed up to vote.
Right.
Do you know how many inactive voters we have today? Now, if I showed up and voted, I'd become active, right?
As of today, we have 6,306 inactive voters.
So what happened to the other 11,000? 5,000 showed up to vote, so they became active because of that.
Well, out of the 17, 5,000 became inactive because they voted in November.
Right.
Yeah.
So that gets us down to,
12.
12, and then we did the mass deletion afterwards.
okay.
So some people left the list.
Yes. People who haven't been, probably moved out, who have been inactive about like for 4 years, so once we do the mass deletion, the system picks them up and deletes them automatically.
And so right now, we have
6,306.
6,306. I just, you said you did a mass deletion. What is,
The state requires us to do a mass deletion,
okay?
and once we do the mass deletions, anybody who hasn't voted for 2 state elections and who has answered the census and they've been inactive for so long, once we bring this up, the system automatically deletes anybody who has no voter activity or no recent census year.
So basically, if I do not vote or file a census for 4 years, you're gonna delete me?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, and, okay,
But to do it in a different way, I stay on the list from the day that I registered to vote, and it's from the day that I'm marked inactive, I stay on that list. If I don't do anything, I stay on the list for 4 years.
Correct. So it takes a while to get deleted, basically.
Yeah, 4 years.
Yeah.
I'd rather it take longer than short, I mean,
Yeah, no, I hear you.
It gives everybody a chance to update the status.
Oh, yeah, it's
Yeah.
democracy.
Yeah.
I want to disenfranchise people. I just want people to know that it's,
there was something in the
like, why are they
paperwork
still on there if they're inactive? Well, it takes 4 years.
that you gave us that talked about, on June 1, to send out a mailing.
Those are confirmation notices. You'll see it in this round of the census, which is going out, I believe, tomorrow.
Good time.
People will send back their censuses, and we'll run through the list of everybody who sent back the census, compare it to voters, to see inactive. So all the inactive voters who are inactive by June 1 have to get a confirmation notice by law. That gets mailed at their last known address. It's that card, again, the voter says, are you still living here? Or did you move? If you moved, let us know where you moved to. If you're still living here, check the box and sign it. Essentially, we cannot do anything unless the voter permits it.
So if I hadn't voted in 4 years and I hadn't returned a census in 4 years, I should have gotten that June 1 mailing, is that?
Yeah, sometime earlier, during a non-census answer period. And that would have happened long before the 2 biennial election time period passes.
So it sounds like it's even longer than 4 years, it's more like 5 or 6 years?
It's about 4. It can be, I've seen it go as long as 5, but I don't think I've seen it more than that.
One other question I get,
I'm sorry, I didn't get why it would be more.
Because a biennial election doesn't necessarily happen all the time. It's supposed to happen every 2 years, but sometimes it happens earlier.
Okay. Sorry about that.
no, the only other thing is, people often say, so-and-so passed away, but they still show up on the list, which I get because you got the 2 biennial elections and the 4 unreturned censuses or whatever. If the family said, he's dead, can you just take him off the list? Will you?
No, not if the family says so.
Okay.
We require a certified death certificate.
Okay, so if the person passed away in Lawrence and the death certificate's upstairs,
Yeah, I mean, we go through that monthly. In fact, Richard, that's one of his jobs.
okay,
Goes through all the death certificates to see if there are voters and runs them through the CVR to see if they're still on the CVR.
okay, so that's something we actively do. We
That's
check
correct.
the death, and how often do we do that? Annually or?
Monthly.
Wow, okay, so,
And if that person passes away in another city and we don't have the death certificate on file, the state every 6 months sends us a list of potential,
Okay.
deceased people.
so with that 6 month, if they pass away, it should be within 6 months, let's say 7 months, just to be rounded out.
Pretty good. They
because-
usually send us right before, like, an election, a list of, like, anybody who's passed away out of the city with the
Okay.
date of death and everything, and with that permission, we're allowed to delete.
Okay, good. Because I know people get upset when they see their deceased relatives still on the list, so, just knowing that within a 7-month period or so, like, say it was in Holy Family Methuen, so that wasn't in our system, you'd still have it within 6 months or 7 months just to round out. Okay, no, that's fair. Thank you.
I think that's a good thing that we learned, that it takes a very long time to get off the inactive list, if you do nothing. How about, like, do you try to clean some stuff up? I know there's been talk about, that I didn't move, but I re-registered.
Somewhere
I'm absent-minded, and, I don't remember whether or not I registered, so then I end up registering twice. Is there a deduplication process to make sure that let me finish. So I live at 12 Jefferson Street. I got, registered to vote, at the Labor Day Festival. And then I go to get my license renewed and I do again. Is there anything that checks for those duplicates?
Yeah, usually, a A lot of people, when they do a change of address, they go to the registry of motor vehicles. We get a list every morning around 9 o'clock, about 28 to 30 people registering to vote, and a lot of times those people appeared already registered, so once I do them, I choose them as a duplicate, and it merges them with the old voter activity, and it updates the record, even if they were inactive too.
So, yeah, so because they just registered, so that's an activity that takes you off the inactive list.
Correct.
That's interesting.
Through you, Mr. Chairman.
Counselor Vasquez.
That's a very interesting question because I know a person, a friend of mine specifically, who, when he registered, he wrote the name, well, he wrote it right, but the way he read, it didn't appear right, and the way he came out registered, the spelling wasn't correct. So he re-registered, and then the spelling was wrong in one, yet when he registered again, the spelling came out correct.
There's a lot of issues with the registry of motor vehicles. Sometimes when they register somebody, they take the information over the counter, and a lot of times they misspell the name or even the address. And basically, like, if you registered as Daniel Rivera and you have a middle initial and you go to the registry and you add it in, you'll completely appear as basically a different person sometimes because the system is not going to merge you because you had a middle initial on your prior registrations compared to what the RMV is sending us.
Or a junior or senior.
Exactly.
And they might actually be a legit junior and senior
Yep.
situation.
And what will happen in that?
And also the state sends us potential duplicates. They'll show us both names, the way they're spelled. It happens a lot of times with when a woman gets married and she carries both names, and sometimes she'll appear as one name. So when the state sends us a list with potential duplicates, we're supposed to merge them. We'll add them to the most recent one that they want to appear as a voter.
Thank you.
Cool. So there is an effort to deduplicate.
Yes.
Councilor Bernal, if you had more questions on the inactive, I think we passed it. And I wanna give you an
No, it's it.
opportunity.
My last one was could you give us a current number? And he did, so thank you.
Yeah, because I think I ran past it by mistake, so. What is a provisional ballot? I know we talked a little bit about it, and do they get counted?
The garden variety provisional ballot is someone who shows up at the poll, whatever precinct, and doesn't appear on the voting list. The poll workers, wardens, clerks are informed, call central office, see if you can't locate them anywhere in the state, see what's going on. Can't find them, even if they could locate them in the state, at least we know they're from somewhere else, or, maybe you should go to Methuen, go to Andover, we should vote. We get that a lot, believe it or not. Sometimes, and the poll workers are trained, look, they're here, they want to vote now. They're not going back to Haverhill, they're not going to Methuen, they want to vote now. They're advised to inform the voter, look, you're not on our list here, we can't find you anywhere, you appear to be registered in Haverhill if that's the case. No, I want to vote here, I'm at my
Do we
friend's
have
house.
a document that shows you where everybody's registered to vote in the
It's
whole
central
state?
voter registry only, not a document necessarily, but if they check, if they.
They
can-
call you guys, get you,
That's right.
you guys will check.
Right. Assume even that they're just not on any list in any part of Massachusetts. Still allowed to vote. That ballot would be set aside by the warden, by the clerk, who's part of their duties, as a provisional voter. They're required to fill out a voter affirmation, provisional affirmation form, name, address, date of birth, and the reason why they're not allowed to vote. Pretty much a checklist format. Where did you register last, and where do you think you're registered from? And that information is very helpful. That ballot is numbered, tallied consecutively at the poll, set aside, put into a sleeve, and marked provisional ballot number 1, number 2, number 3, et cetera. And a sheet is filled out by the warden, the clerk, as to the name, date of birth, and address of the person before them. And that is the essence of the garden variety provisional voting. That ballot is set aside, sent back to the poll location in a transfer case, taken with the police officers, and taken by the staff, and put into order by ward and precinct, and then reviewed by the Board of Registrars, who then does another check with a CVR operator, typically Mr. Reyes, to try to determine the registration status of the voter, as of the date of the election. That information is imparted to the Board of registrars, who then vote independently as to whether or not to count that ballot.
So the only ballot that doesn't get counted on election day is the provisional ballot?
That's correct. Doesn't pass through the optical reader or tallied by the warden or clerk.
And we've had, and in the last election, there was only 300 and something of them.
I think it was about 335, 350, something like that. In total, I think 35 were approved.
And now that I'm thinking about the math on this, so then the actual number of inactive voters was what, you said 5,000 something people voted?
About a little bit over, about like 5,846, if I'm not mistaken, voted on the presidential.
So on the sheets, on the counting sheets, you should see 5,400 and whatever marks of challenges, right?
Not necessarily.
Not every inactive voter gets challenged. A lot of inactive voters will bring a copy of a utility bill, or if they were, bring something.
Driver license.
They'll bring something that, ties them to that address that they were living at. Inactive voter only gets challenged if they don't have nothing to provide as proof of that address.
Ah. An inactive voter only gets challenged when there's no proof of address.
Or by challenge by somebody else, or an observer.
Yeah. So is there a correlation between the number of affirmation of current and continuous residency and the number of challenged voters? So those numbers should be the same, right? For every form of affirmation of current and continuous residency, you should have a mark on the sheet.
I would hope that my checkers would mark every ballot that's inactive and challenged by an affirmation. The more reliable number, if I were to choose the two, would be the affirmation.
Okay.
Because it has a signature of the person who's casting the ballot.
I guess what I'm trying to get to with that is that we're suggesting you have a problem there, and I'm wanting to show you some information that would suggest that there's a problem there for you to go and correct it. So if you see that there's a difference between the number of affirmations of current continuous residencies and the number of time that they're being marked on the sheet, I think that you have information to then go and make a corrective action when you're training.
I see that every election, no matter how I address it. My more reliable information is the affirmation. And the affirmation has a signature, because if there's a challenge and if there's something done either statewide, locally, or by a candidate,
I got you.
I'm taking out the signature of the person signing.
So I'll say it again, right, in a different way.
All right.
Every one of these that has an affirmation of current by your standard and by the policy has to be challenged on the paper.
That's correct.
Okay.
Doesn't
So-
happen, though.
And I'm telling you that the way you make it happen is that you train better.
Still won't happen. You'll see it every election. They will not be a direct one-to-one.
I think it's not gonna happen because you won't want it to
No,
happen.
that's not true.
different.
That's not
I think
true.
you're ill-equipped to make the training.
No,
but
I
that-
disagree with you.
But those are just our own feelings about it.
Look,
That doesn't mean you should.
if you're gonna do a performance evaluation on my work as a clerk, I'm gonna ask to go into executive session and ask that,
Not doing an evaluation as your work as a
you're
clerk.
telling me I'm not working correctly.
No, you-
I'm trying to do the best I can with
Oh, Mr.
having
Clerk,
every
I-
single challenge ballot challenged.
And I was nice, and I was telling you in a really nice way that if
I
you look
appreciate
at,
that.
if you look at the affirmations, and you look at the number of people who actually mark the challenges on the sheet, that difference means you should train people better. That's all I said. And then you said, it doesn't matter how much I train people. And that, to me, means that you don't want to train them better.
No, that's not true. That's not
So
what
then
I,
just,
that's not
you know
what I
I'm saying?
think.
So if we,
Training will continue.
yeah, but I'm not looking for perfection. I'm not saying you're gonna get to 100% those matches. But if the
I want
divergences are larger, if the divergences are large, you wanna make it smaller. That's all I'm saying. And when you tell me
I
it
appreciate
doesn't
that.
matter,
No, and I.
That's
no,
when I question your ability as a
I'm not saying it doesn't matter, because I want to reach perfection. I want to
Alright.
get 100%
So it-
compliance out of
yeah.
my poll workers.
when you say it doesn't matter, that's the part that
I
get concerned.
apologize, that's a wrong use of words.
But because training's, part of this is so
Training's-
we can make it a better training. This is it for
My
training
staff will
material?
tell you that every training session, I tell them, mark the sheet make sure you mark the in-out sheet, challenge voter on every inactive voter that signs an affirmation. I tell them every session.
It's me. The facilities and supplies, unless anybody has any questions about the provisional ballots. All right, how many working voting booths do you currently have? And I guess you can read your response, because it's a long response.
Well, we went out, I went out with DPW, I think on the 14th, and asked the person who puts them up at the polling locations. It looks to be about 100, 120, which is severely deficient. From what I can tell, just as a numbers, about 192 should be available to outfit all 24 poll locations. I recognize that we would run out of voting booths, and there'd be a depletion as early as probably a year and a half ago. And that's why I came before the Budget Committee asking for some monies to supplement some of the voting booths, to buy 10, 5 at a time, 5 each year, to keep supplementing until I could reach an amount that would be sufficient to run an election, to reasonably run an election. I'm at this point where, you know, and even looking at the inventory we have, the last time we purchased voting booths, the council president and I opted to have the Essex County House of Correction inmates at CAC construct them, which just proved to be a bad idea, because they almost immediately started breaking. The workmanship was very poor, and in fact, there's probably only maybe a dozen of those left. The balance of those are about, most of those are 150 to 175 damage that I'm reporting to you. The booths that survived, the 100 to 120, are about 70, 75 years old. Very well constructed, but they're on the way out. And as each election goes by, even though they're treated very well, they will deplete. They're just not in great shape. The new ones, I can't say are any better. The poor quality of workmanship is certainly, in our day and age, is hit voting booths. There is no real great ones. I've been surveying, looking at voting booths for 3 years now. And they range in the spectrum from those spindly ones with the brushed aluminum with terrible, tables on them, to finally the ones I've been purchasing used at half price, which seem to work pretty well. It will be a bid item. I'm going to suggest and ask the council to probably provide for a capital project to purchase them. These things are expensive. They're a specialty item, and they got us in a corner. They don't make them cheap anywhere. The projected cost is somewhere between $40,000 and $60,000, I believe is in my report, for an outfit of probably another 100. There's not much I can do about that except for propose it and ask for funding.
As you know, the day of the election, we had, Mary Immaculate, which is a high voting location, and then later on, when I was at the Storer School, another high voting location, the number of booths to people, basically, I think with small exception, the number of booths needed to the location was off. So I just thought, this is a problem, because we're not gonna get people through the line fast enough. And you said we have these problems and all this stuff, and you explained to me that day, and I appreciated that. So then I had a conversation with the director of DPW, again, why coordinated meetings would be good, because you could say, hey, I don't have enough places, and you say, hey, can your guys build me 10? And he said, if I had known that a month earlier, that I could build 10. So I would suggest that on top of looking for private vendors, and on top of looking for prison workers, that you maybe have a conversation with the DPW director
I did.
and see if he could provide that for you.
He said, I met with his carpenter said, everything that's in there is junk.
Okay,
That's-
so, but see how I'm saying something and you're saying something totally different.
I met with him.
I'm suggesting that you have a conversation with them and have him build you new ones, not go
Oh,
in there.
I'm sorry, I thought you meant to reconstruct the
Yeah,
old
no,
ones.
no, I'm not talking about
My
that.
apologies.
Yeah, because, you're right, some of those things that we bought and spent a lot of money for,
Did you
it's not
see
really
those?
worth it. And what I'm concerned about is that, you know, we have in our head the picture of this big machine that you pull the lever and everything slides. We don't really need that. We just need a place for people to go and write. And I think that if given those instructions, the DPW could probably fabricate some for you.
Certainly, that's certainly another option I had not considered. My first option was try to reconstruct the broken ones we had, and DPW workers, the carpenter said, you know, just
Yeah, I wouldn't
firewood.
have them do that.
Firewood.
Yeah, I mean, I would suggest that you ask them to have some of them built.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not looking for a Cadillac here. I mean, I'm looking for something, as you suggest, to simply write on. The other items that
So-
we were depleting in is the handicap or the assisted voter machine tables, which have been just disappearing, being taken from central storage, because we don't have a locked facility to keep this material, number one. And tables to be used at the check-in and check-out tables. Those things are falling over.
So will you communicate with the DPW director? about that? Can
Absolutely.
you CC us on that?
No question.
Again, sometimes we had the director of inspectional services in front of us, and they were talking about an $80,000 solution for something they could have done in an Excel spreadsheet. So I don't want any, I don't want.
I'd settle for 10 more each election.
Any other questions about the facilities? Why are we, the voting location that's in, the warden is there, what's the voting location that's, the Rollins? And the Rollins and the library in South Lawrence, the branch.
South Lawrence Branch Library?
F3.
Yeah. Are we trying to find a space that's absolutely incapable of holding more than 10 people? Because
I see it. The original, we had approval from council to move A3 and A4 into the Partham together as all one polling location. I forget how, I think it was nixed at the last second, and I was told not to do it. I don't want to say who, I just say.
let's go, I mean, the room at the Storrow School that you used was totally inadequate.
I agree.
So isn't there a gym in there?
Again,
A cafeteria
I've been
in there?
trying to secure a place, no, there isn't a place in the gym, I believe that's because it's not handicapped accessible, because it's
It's
ground.
downstairs.
Something like that. I think that we looked at that early on. I wanted to get it out of there entirely and put everybody in the Partham in District A. But it was opposed as a centralized location. We did the same thing for South Lawrence East for District F, and was approved for that as well. And that was nixed again at the last second. So we were only able,
So things like that, like I don't know what that all means, and I don't know who was it that authorized it or didn't authorize it, all that stuff. So all I'm suggesting is that those two places, specifically the ones that I've seen, that are totally inadequate for voting.
my biggest
I mean,
concern.
if me and the warden at the, what school was it? Rollins. At the Rollins. If me and the warden stand in the Rollins too long, you're not gonna get much voters through there. That's how small that joint is.
My
And I'm
biggest.
trying to lose weight, get me wrong, but I'm just saying that's,
I
It's
would add, I
crazy.
would add to that as the Engine 8 Firehouse as well. How a voting place to this day and age is put into place where there's grease, oil, and had been fire trucks. In a building that probably should be condemned, I don't get that. My focus is try to move that one as well,
all right.
and no heat, by the way.
Yeah, no, that's,
No, and through you, Mr. Chairman. And voters will appreciate it if it's moved because a lot of them, I've received a lot of complaint in this past election because many of them had to come from, Cross Street and, Washington Street and areas that were actually too far from them to get there. And I know I have spoken previously with Mr. Tejeda with regards to
We
this.
already spoke with Ralph Carrero,
Wonderful.
and he was agreed to get the charter school as a polling location.
That's excellent.
And if you see,
who goes
Now-
there? Who would go there?
That will be everyone in C1.
C1 from Engine A, because if you see now the configuration of the district, you have people from Manchester Street, Lake Street, West Street, all the way down to Tower Hill, Engine A. The charter school is right, most on the middle.
Yep,
of
it's
the
right in the
district.
middle.
And Carrero say, okay.
Well,
Thank you for taking care
we
of
could
it.
pass it, and then some magical person could say no, and then it won't happen.
It can happen.
How do you plan, I'm sorry about this, I appreciate everybody's indulgence. How do you plan for having enough pens, ballots, and booths?
My staff tells,
We know the ballot part, right, because the state provides us the ballots.
well, on state elections, I mean, we also keep an eye on that for municipal elections, because we're on our own. I try to hit 100% print quality, print number available. Sending them out to the polls hits about, what, 75%, 80%? And we usually don't hit that number on a municipal anyway. Pens, easy matter, we can double up our complement and have another set in storage, ready to go if we need to. Booths, we discussed. So, I mean, supplies we can address, and relatively simply.
And I'm not being fresh. I was being fresh earlier, I'm not being fresh now. A piece of duct tape and a string for the pens. Did you get it? A piece of duct tape.
They'll still find a way to dry them out. They dry out fast, and that's what happens.
So,
We've done it. The better way to do it is to actually double up the complement, because people walk away with them, they dry up, they leave the caps off. If someone's not vigilant, that happens. I'd rather pay the 30 cents for the pen, which is a marker, than have, half an hour trying to wrap duct tape around it, and then it dries out anyway, and we gotta take it out.
the amount of time spent on finding new pens, that you could just tell them, hey, just make sure you go back to the booths and make sure the caps are back on the pen?
Absolutely, and if I
'Cause-
have them available,
Can't possibly know my whole thought because I wasn't done. So if you get them, you secure them to the booths, you tell them that these problems of the drying up and the caps and all this other stuff, tell them to focus on that. That way, the workers there, because they're focusing on finding new pens when all those other ones walk away. Again, it's constructive criticism. I want you to think about it. I don't want you to tell me no right off the bat. When I
take
hear
it-
no right off the bat, to me, is like, it doesn't matter what I tell you, you're just gonna keep doing it the bad
but
way.
we'll take it as constructive criticism. I appreciate that, Counselor, thank you.
Because even the warden that day were saying, if we should probably just secure these to the booths.
There is a piece of paper that actually goes out that you're supposed to attach to the booth for many years now, and it says, please return pen to the desk, right in front. Wardens, poll workers, and even voters see it right in the booth, so
Yeah.
even with that,
You take the paper.
Yeah, I mean, even if you go to jail, not that I've been to jail, even if you go to jail, the pen is like, you can't take the pen. It's chained down. You ain't going nowhere, but the pen, it's chained down, so,
I think we should print on the side of the pen, property of City of Lawrence.
yeah, you're
And-
kidding me?
and-
People will
and-
take it on purpose.
No, let them take it.
Souvenir.
Yeah.
Just a little levity, I apologize, but
That's, again,
thank you.
that's all I had, and those are the questions I had. I don't know if Councilor Brunel or any of the councilors present have any other questions. If not, I'm gonna ask people in the audience if they have a question.
I just had a couple quick questions, and I definitely want to hear from the people in the audience,
Go ahead.
too. We had our Mount Vernon neighborhood meeting this weekend, and we had the Sacred Heart neighborhood meeting on Monday night, and we did announce that this was going to be happening. So, in response to that, a lot of people, I shouldn't say a lot, 4 or 5 people, did shoot me some questions and just asked me to make sure they got asked. And I think they have, but the first one was with regard to the voter list. How do they get updated from duplications, people moving? I think we have really covered that monthly the death certificates get taken into consideration. Every 6 months you get the death certificates from the state. That you conduct deletion sessions. I think that's something that people were not aware of. But that the state law requires this 2 biennial elections, or basically a 4-year process. So if it seems a little bit long, it's that 4-year process. So I think that question I feel like got answered pretty well tonight, and I'm grateful for your help. And I just got that question over to Clerk Maloney around noontime today, and he actually had a written memo back to us on that. So I am grateful for your work on that as well. The second question was, what exactly are the duties and responsibilities of the election department workers? Is there a written job description for the staff in the election office, and is there a written description for the extra staff that's brought on election day, meaning the clerks and the wardens? What I hear you saying is, or through the memo, that our staff on election day gets trained, but there's really not a written job description for them. There's some guidelines of how to have an election. That the staff in the elections department, there definitely is a written job description, which you provided me with a copy of, which is great. And I guess the question actually kind of tied back to number one was who maintains the list? And is it maintained by the election office staff? Is that, or is it maintained by the city?
Voter list?
The voter list, the list itself.
The voter list, we're the entry point. We're the election division, every city and town is the entry point. Every city and town participates and maintains a voter list by registering voters on the Central Voter Registry System, CVRVRIS.
Okay.
That list is maintained by the state ultimately, and we operate it, essentially.
But physically in Lawrence, if Mr. Galvin was here tonight, would he ask you who's updated the list, or would he ask Mr. Tejeda who's updated the list? Like, where does that fall?
Whether you ask me or anybody else, we get them a copy of the list upon request.
Yeah, but,
Order it.
Can I follow up on that?
Sure.
Who is the person ultimately responsible for that duty? I know that everybody could do the work. I know that if, Mr. Tejeda had a heart attack, that,
Ultimately, the city
ultimately,
clerk.
who's the person that's
Ultimately, the
responsible?
city clerk.
So you're ultimately responsible for that?
That's correct.
Okay.
In 90% of the time, 100% of the time, I order the voting list to the state. And they downloaded the voting list overnight. I ordered today at 4 o'clock. We gotta get tomorrow at 9 o'clock. The extra use of the CVR.
Sorry about that, Councilor.
no, thank you. And then the final question was, what is the process for distributing absentee ballots, collecting and processing of absentee ballots, and ensuring the legality of each ballot? And that's the one I didn't feel like I really got a clear answer on. We got a copy of the ballot, which does have some instructions on it, which were helpful, and it just says it's governed by state law. And a lot of the other things today were governed by state law also, but you gave us really clear cites and really good copies of the law. And granted, you just got this at noontime, I'm not trying to be over the top, but do you know roughly, is it chapter 51, or is it a different section?
It's either 51 or 54, section 89.
Okay,
And I can send you the statute. I didn't have time to get a copy of the statute, so I wanted to get you the substance of the law.
yeah,
Which is what's on the
ballot
application.
itself. Okay, but yeah, I would be grateful if you could work with me over the next couple days to get
Sure.
the actual site on that, the 51 or 54. I do think, whether it's real or not, there's a perception that people come in and get absentee ballots by the armload and go home and fill them out in a closet and bring them all back. And what reassurances can you give us that that's not happening?
Two things that occurred over since the last election. One of the things is I reviewed every single absentee ballot application, every single absentee ballot cast, whether they were open or not, to look for patterns of what you're suggesting. I get the same thing that you hear as well.
Yeah.
That someone's just walking with an armful of ballots and walking out and taking them back and dropping them off. I don't know, for what it's worth, I did not see any of that type of activity. There were some tightening up aspects on the absentee ballot applications, which will occur certainly immediately, requiring that every single absentee ballot requested be preceded by an application and request.
So every ballot fills out this application?
Every requestor, whether it be the individual themselves or a family member, which is also provided by statute, I'll give you a copy of that statute as well. And again, I gave you the substance of who qualifies as a family member, et cetera, who can cast absentee ballots or request absentee ballots.
So can I just stop for a second?
Sure.
Sorry about that. So you're saying that people got absentee ballots who did not apply for them?
No. What I'm saying is, there were probably a dozen instances where I saw people sending letters asking for absentee
Oh, okay.
ballots.
I see what you're
Now, apparently that had been past practice in the city of Lawrence, and I was not as quite aware of it until I saw the actual request. So I approached my staff member in charge of the absentee ballot. I said, "What, you realize that letter is not an affidavit form, because if there is something to be done about that request, it has to be an affidavit form." So
what you're saying.
what I want to do is bump that up and insist upon it that even people that send in, I saw attorneys sending in requests for absentee ballots without, the affidavit, the jurat council, as you know, which is absolutely necessary and required under the statute. So I mean, again, I want to improve upon that process. I didn't see, again, 500 of these things, but 2 is too many.
So if my neighbor asks me, Counselor Brunel, you're my council person, can you get me an absentee ballot? I can say no.
You
I
can say
can't-
no.
But I can get you the application.
I'll get you the application. They
So-
can mail it to us. You can bring the application to us.
So I can walk out with an armload of applications, but I cannot walk out with an armload of ballots.
The application is disseminated statewide everywhere you go.
You can
It's
print
even
it off the
online.
internet.
I'm sorry?
I can print that off the internet,
Absolutely.
so I don't even have to come to you for the.
Nope, it's on the internet, that's right. Letters, certainly with this election, and what I intend to do is certainly letters that we receive, we get a return request with a cover letter, a standard form letter. Please fill out the application, return us in time.
Okay, so then I bring you back the application filled out. Do you, again, it's for my neighbor, not a family member. I bring you back my neighbor's application. You don't give me the ballot, you mail her the ballot, is that? You should never be giving me the ballot unless I can check off that family member box.
Now, there are only a couple instances in which a ballot is to be hand-delivered, is one at the request of the voter who may be homebound 5 days before the election, which is in the form itself, and nursing homes.
Okay.
And I deliver the ballots to
So
the
really, there
nursing
should
home.
be a real mailing address affiliated, that it's getting mailed to and getting mailed back.
You can have a mailing address and your voter location address, because oftentimes they don't coincide.
True.
And it's on the form again itself.
Okay,
A student living
that's helpful, though, thank you.
school in Connecticut lives in South Lawrence.
Sure.
Yeah.
So my mailing address is the school in Connecticut, just like the young girl in Lowell.
With the younger
but-
voters, we get the emails.
Yeah.
I've seen 2 or 3 of those. That's got to stop,
Yeah.
the potential for harm.
So you can't get an absentee ballot request by, I could request the application by email. I just can't request a
Right,
ballot by email. I
exactly.
gotcha.
The only one who can vote by email are military.
Interesting, okay. Those are my questions, thank you.
Okay, it is really the chair's prerogative to let folks speak at the committee meeting from public, so if anybody has a question, I'd like for the person to ask the question.
I can
and
answer them.
not engage in a debate, so we want to hear the full questions. Because I'm sure you have something important to say. Just name it. You have 4 questions?
I have 4 questions.
Can we do them one at a time?
Oh, yes, I will.
Okay.
Okay, name's Dick Russell, 34 Cross Street. Okay, it was brought up in the discussion about an hour ago that the mayor needs to approve the assignments of the poll workers. Is this a state or a federal law, or is this just one of his,
No, the
Thanks.
question's answered, all right, we got the question.
it's a state law? Okay.
Okay, so the chief executive of each community gets to,
Cities and towns do it differently than cities. I mean, towns do it differently than cities.
they don't have a mayor.
Okay, second question, and I don't bring this up as a racial issue or anything, but how does the ethnic breakdown of the population of Lawrence compare with the ethnic breakdown of the poll workers and the poll workers at the various polling places?
I think this has to do with the DOJ announcement that we got.
The breakdown of the city is 66, 34.
Okay, I can buy that.
But the breakdown of the workers is almost 50-50.
And most of it, and the fact that there has to be even a counting of it is through the DOJ
Exactly.
that mandated us to.
The consent decree in 2001,
Yeah.
they assigned a number of bilingual poll workers for, based on the numbers of the city have on that time. It was 41%. It was 41.59. But we keep the same numbers of the poll workers.
Even though the percentages have changed.
Even of the numbers of the
Registered voters.
increase from 41 to 66.
Gotcha.
Okay, now,
Go to the mic.
District
back to Mike.
F, down in District F, which is basically a white area. The poll workers down there, basically white as opposed to where I live up in District D. Well, actually, I vote down, what, at the towers now, thank you?
So let me just try to, let me try to get, your question is whether or not do they assign the diversity?
Is the ethnic breakdown the same ethnic breakdown as the voting district?
I don't want to answer for the staff, and I want to hear their answer, but what I tend to observe in District E is that the poll workers in E1 tend to live in E1. The poll workers in E2 tend to live in E2, E3, and E4. So I think you're
Oh, okay.
probably getting that because it's
That
the
answers the
neighborhood
question then.
that they live in, yeah.
Okay, that takes care of the second question.
I think that's true.
Okay, the third question. Okay, now, I've gone in circles with Mr. Maloney over this. Okay, after 2 no-shows of me voting and me not filling out my census cards, by his own words, I am subject to removal from the voting list. Okay, those are your words. I am subject. Is subject a definite? Is it a given that I will be removed or I could be removed?
But before you answer, I just want to be clarification. After 2 no-shows of state elections, which is actually the 4 years.
4 years,
Okay,
yeah.
yeah, okay.
Well, I only say the word subject because if we miss the mass deletion, and we have, it doesn't happen right on time. And that's the only reason I say that. But if you want me to be more definitive, yes, you'll be gone.
That's good, okay.
Last one? No.
Actually, I lost something somewhere along the line. But, okay. The voting list, I go downstairs, I go to Mr. Maloney, Mr. Tejeda, I say, I want a copy of the voting list. I pay the $10, I get a CD. I get a voting list on a spreadsheet that has, I'm gonna say approximately 26 columns. Is there information beyond what is given to the public on that spreadsheet? As in a record of when people voted in the last elections?
But can we ask it differently?
Pardon me?
Can I ask it in a different way?
Sure.
Can you tell us what's on those sheets? From left to right?
On the voting list layout, you had the voters' identification number, voters' last name, voters' first name, set,
Party?
address, street number, precinct, party, but you don't have the voter activity on the
How about date of birth?
day of birth.
Date of birth is.
But you don't have the voter activity on the voting list.
Okay, so what I get, that disc that I get,
Yeah.
that is everything that you have on your computer. Okay, Richard L. Russell at 34 Cross Street.
Okay.
Everything I see going out to column number, I'm gonna say 26.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually want to answer, because I know a little bit about the voter data. There's different types of lists you can get from the city, from the state, and some of them have just voter information that he just described, and some of them have, the street listing, right, that says, I think it might even have less stuff.
Well, you got the census
And the
information.
census.
The census had the telephone numbers, occupation,
Yeah.
and everything else. Even the dots, how many dots do you have in your house?
So the census list has more information, but that's not what they used to do
I'm
check-in.
not interested in the census
Yeah.
list, I'm interested in the voting list. Okay, the one line, I misspoke, I got 5 questions.
Okay.
The last question, how many people are presently on the voting list as of right now? Okay,
Say it again?
34,732. Don't quote me on the 30.
I'm gonna go 700.
okay,
That's-
34,700. The disc that I got that was in effect for the election of November of last year had 36,000. Okay, we've lost, what, about 2,000 voters?
Yeah, because they said that they did a purging.
The voting list for November had 40,573 voters.
I got is, got
The 36,000 was for September,
The primary list.
state primary.
Yep, and there was,
So we've gone, the list that, for the vote, I probably have it at home somewhere. So we've gone from 40,000 people on the list for the election in November. Now we're down to 34,000. So you people have in effect gone through and cleaned out all of the people that have flip-flop surnames, questionable date of births. Wait a
no,
minute.
let's be clear, just because I don't think that's the case. They purged through what they usually do, and some of the stuff that they mentioned was the death, people who have passed the 4 years of inactivity.
Have
and-
you-
And,
Oh, okay.
some of the stuff that they talked about that they did. I don't want to think that they did all of the stuff that they may not.
Have you actually seen this list, the voting list?
Yeah.
Okay? Have you actually put it in alphabetical order or by street address? It's wonderful what Excel and some of the spreadsheet programs can do. You can do a lot of stuff with it. And you see people, the same name with 2 different birth dates 3 days apart.
Yeah.
With the sequential voter registration numbers.
Yeah, I gotta tell you, then, I appreciate that, and I think the feedback that we're getting is that you guys need to make a better effort to try to make sure you don't do without the deduplication. My name is Dan Rivera. It might as well be Joe Smith. It's a common
Oh, I know
Hispanic.
that.
It's a common Hispanic name, so it's possible that there's a guy who's Dan Rivera who's born.
Well, I understand, like I said, I've gone back and forth with Mr. Maloney about this, about cleansing the voter list. It isn't their responsibility. It isn't the Secretary of State's responsibility. It's me
Yeah,
to question you.
got it.
He'll give me this paperwork, all the paperwork to drag you in. If you don't come in to answer questions, you're off the list.
Gotcha.
But the thing is questionable as the voting list is in Lawrence with some of the stuff that's going on, why should that be something that falls on the individual? That should be a function of city or state employees.
Gotcha.
But that's it.
Gotcha.
But I just had to get this
Mrs.
stuff
Grunge,
out.
you got something for us?
Related to that, I mean, the board of registrars, you can.
Wait till you get to the mic before you start talking so we can all hear you.
I was
I
like-
gotta tell you, we were trying to get out of here before 10,
I know,
so I
I
apologize.
just, the board of registrars, if I challenge a voter registration, they can remove the voter, right? They can make a decision and remove them. I mean, well, I'm reading the law, so that's what, I was just wondering.
But wait a minute,
okay.
before you go too fast. You're talking about the Board of Registrars
Yeah,
that
so it's
meets monthly or whenever, or as needed, right?
I don't know, when does it?
That's not somebody at the election day. That's a process separate and apart, right?
Yeah, but we're talking about purging the list, removing duplicates, and, you know, you can hardly ever do it. And I was just
Saying
saying
it
that you can
fast.
challenge.
Sorry about
If
that.
I challenge the voter to the Board of Registrars, I believe after due process, the Board of Registrars can
Remove the
say,
person.
remove these people,
Yeah.
correct?
But
I-
saying it fast doesn't make it a
I
fast
know.
process.
Well, I'm trying, I know we're in a
Okay.
hurry. Okay, so I'll just be quick here. First off, given that we do have on the voters list duplicate registrations,
What
and
appears
they
to be.
can both be active, and they can both be active. I can, show you many active, very similar name, the same name, maybe exactly the same name.
Question.
So whenever you go in to the voters list and you say, okay, they look for you and they cross off your name on the list, how do they decide? Do you tell them to say, well, are you this one or this one? I mean, because there will be two that are exactly the same, maybe a middle initial. How do they decide which one to cross off? And then, how does the same one get crossed off on the checkout list? And which ones do you scan in to make the electronic purged list, right? You go and scan in the
So I think,
barcodes.
I got the question. The question, whoever wants to answer this. The question is, how do you make sure that the person that's on the list, if they're similar names, I'm not saying that they're fake different ones, if they're similar names, that the right person gets checked in, the right person gets checked out, and the right person gets scanned? So, Mrs. Grant, letting up the
As we're
microphone.
scanning the voting list and we come across names that are duplicates and they're both crossed off, because on the voter ID is basically the voter's date of birth, which a lot of people don't know. What we do is, we try to merge them when we find out if they're exactly the same person. So like that, the voter activity is gonna go to that same person once we merge those two names. Honestly, sometimes it could, over be seen, because like I said, sometimes people have a maiden name or just by one number different on the date of birth. It makes it hard. Sometimes we call the help desk at the state, and they're the ones who help us merge it sometimes,
Gotcha.
if we kind of confirm if they're the same voter.
Yeah, these algorithms aren't as precise as people might want them to be. But, so the process is, if you see the duplicates, you guys are merging them
Yeah,
together.
before we get them voter
But on
activity.
E-Day, on Election Day, if that happens, it's really up to the poll checker to make the judgment call. at the
Yes,
end of the
and if they're gonna see the two names, hopefully they could cross off, like if it's one in the top, cross off the same one, not different ones on the voting list.
Yeah, I think this goes back to training, to make sure that they watch out for those things. What's your next question?
Okay, hold on a sec. Going back to when I read the state laws about this, it gives lots. It says the Board of Election Registrars will do A, B, C, D, E, F, and really, in our case, and in many cities, the Elections Department does it. So, can I sometime get a list on, what does the Board of Registrars do? How often does it meet? Just around elections?
All right.
I just haven't,
Yeah, so the question is, when do the Board of Registrar meets, and is there a definition somewhere of what their roles are?
The statute allows a lot of ministerial functions to be performed by the election division in any city or town. I mean, we don't have to be there to certify nomination
Okay.
papers, we don't have to.
So that we're
meet-
not here longer. When do they meet, and what's their function?
The quick answer is the Board of Registrars meets as needed. And essentially
Fine.
around elections is a key point because of provisional balloting.
And where can we find their function?
Not quite sure, but I'm sure it's statutory. I'm sure it's within the
Is
statute.
it in the charter?
It's in the state statute, it's statutory, state statute, state law,
Okay. So the functions of the Board of Registrar and state law.
state law.
All right. Can we get the Mass General law on that sometime, in an email?
Yeah, it's just that, what it says the Board of Registrars does, actually, these guys do, and that's why I was trying to see the division of labor. But one last question. If I don't want to spend $100 to get, a copy of the papers for the election, the check-in, check-out lists and stuff, if I had a couple specific things I wanted to look for, like a recent registration card from somebody that recently registered, or if I just wanted to check a name, a specific name or two on those check-in, check-out books, can I go and look at them sometime, make an appointment? Can I do that? Okay.
Definitely can.
That's what I wanted to know.
Great,
Thank you very much.
thank you. Thank you guys for coming. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your patience, councilors.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion to put this on, table this item. Oh, sorry about that, Bill.
One
Don't
more.
go away. Another citizen has a question. We're not gonna go past 10, though, Bill. Sorry about
Make it real
that.
quick, Mr. Chairman and members of this committee. Bill Collins, One Platte Court, and also a warden in the city elections. And it's been my privilege to serve in that capacity for over a decade. I just want to, I'm going to skip over a lot of this stuff, but warden's notes that was alluded to tonight that is in the manual. I think it would behoove you to request a copy of the warden notes for at least the past two elections, and as far back as you could go. There's a wealth of information there about what happens at the polling place. And I don't think it's been covered tonight at all. And I think you'll be very interested in
Who
what.
publishes that?
Well, each warden basically writes their own notes of any odd occurrences that happen. For instance, challenge ballots, I log in with people's names and addresses.
Oh, that's cool.
But I think
So
you'll
how-
learn a lot as to which wardens are doing their job and which wardens are not. You may see some blank pages.
Can we get that? Yeah.
And for the sake of accuracy, I would suggest you ask for each warden's page to be labeled with the precincts, so they're just not lumped together. And if there is a blank page, I would suggest that you also ask for that, so you'll know which wardens did not log in any complaints at all.
So you're getting that? Okay,
Thank you, I'll make it quick. Appreciate it.
that was it? Thank you, Bill. All right, so we're gonna get those things, Mr. Clerk, you got them?
Yeah, that take to me 10 minutes to get it. We had all the.
We like 10 minutes. Not right now, we don't wanna give you 10 minutes, but we like 10 minutes usually.
All the worker menu, we have on the menu, on the clerk's journal, and we can get it in 5 minutes.
And I don't know, I mean, folks can, say some closing comments if they want, but my closing comment is this, is that I spent all day in a voting booth on election day. I know. Two of the busiest places of the day, and honestly, I want it to be better, the people who were standing in line want it to be better, the workers want it to be better, so I would suggest you guys to figure out a way to make it better. I don't want you to feel like you have to come up with reasons why it wasn't good last time. I want you to think, well, how can we make it better next time? Because honestly, if you spend more time telling us why it was bad the first time, it doesn't make us feel like you're listening to us collectively, the workers, the voters, us, that you're actually thinking, okay, there was a problem, let's fix it next time. Because I know that there's 100 different reasons why things happen, and some of them are legitimate, and some of them should not have happened. But that's not the point. The point is, what are we going to do for the next election? It was a presidential election. So that should have told everybody, bristles and bells, we should do something different and more intense. So that's the message.
Through you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Vasquez.
I would just like to, thank everyone who decides to work on election day. I think that this is a very rewarding job, and a very important part for democracy in this country. Once again, thank you, and now I'd like to make a motion to adjourn. Actually, before I do that, table document 3, oh, you want to say something, Councilor? Motion to table document 335-12.
Second.
Motion been made, second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Sorry.
Aye.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.